in the fog-choked streets of 1930s London, a cryptic note lures Hercule Poirot to a clandestine poker game at Claridge's Hotel, where the stakes are far beyond money. Secrets, betrayal, and murder. When a player drops dead poisoned at the table, Poirot uncovers a web of deception tied to a stolen diamond, a sinister smuggling ring, and a conspiracy threatening Europe's stability. Who is the shadowy dealer pulling the strings? Or why does the glamorous heiress hide her trembling hands? And what deadly secrets bind the disgraced colonel and the sharp-eyed journalist? As Poirot navigates chases, traps, and high-stakes bluffs, each clue unravels a darker truth. Will he outwit the masterminds before the final card falls, or become the next victim in this lethal game? Join Poirot in Hercule Poirot's Risky Bet, a tale of suspense where every move could be his last. Chapter 1. The Whispered Wager. In the heart of London, where the fog clung to the cobblestones like a conspirator's cloak, Hercule Poirot sat in his impeccably ordered apartment at Whitehaven Mansions. The year was 1935, and the city thrummed with a restless energy. Jazz spilling from hidden clubs, motor cars honking through Piccadilly, and whispers of scandal trailing the elite like shadows. Poirot, however, was a man of precision, his moustache waxed to perfection, his potent leather shoes gleaming. He sipped a tisane, savouring the delicate aroma of chamomile, when his valet, George, entered with a silver tray bearing a single envelope. "Monsieur, this arrived by courier. No return address," George said, his voice as measured as the ticking of the ormolu clock on the mantel. Poirot's grey-green eyes, sharp as a falcon's, studied the envelope. It was cream, heavy stock, sealed with a crimson wax stamp, embossed with a curious symbol, a spade crossed with a serpent. He sliced it open with a letter opener, his movements deliberate. Inside, a single sheet of paper bore a typed message, its words as cryptic as they were intriguing. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. Join us at Claridge's Hotel, the Venetian Suite, tonight at 9 p.m. A game awaits, high stakes, higher secrets. The bet is beyond money. Come alone, tell no one." No signature, no flourish. Yet the invitation hummed with menace, like a violin string tuned too tight. Poirot's lips twitched beneath his moustache. "A puzzle," he murmured, "and one that demands the little grey cells." He tucked the note into his waistcoat pocket, his decision made. To ignore such a summons would be to deny his very nature. At precisely 8:55 p.m., Poirot stepped from a black cab into the golden glow of Claridge's Hotel. The doorman, resplendent in his burgundy livery, ushered him into the marble-floored lobby, where chandeliers cast prisms of light across velvet drapes. Poirot's ebony cane tapped a steady rhythm as he ascended to the Venetian suite, his mind cataloguing every detail. The faint scent of cigar, smoke, the nervous fidget of a bellhop, the distant clink of champagne flutes. Danger, he sensed, was already in the air. The Venetian suite was a marvel of decadence, walls adorned with gilded frescoes, a crystal chandelier dripping like a frozen waterfall, and a mahogany table at the centre set for poker. 5 chairs, 4 occupied. Poirot's entrance drew every eye, and he felt the weight of their scrutiny, each gaze a different flavour of suspicion. "Welcome, Monsieur Poirot," said a figure at the table's head, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. He wore a tailored black suit, his face half hidden by the shadow of a fedora. "I am the dealer. You honour us with your presence." Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. "The honour, monsieur, is mine, though I confess I am curious about the nature of this wager." The dealer's lips curled, not quite a smile. "All in good time. Please sit." Poirot took the empty chair, his movements graceful, and surveyed his fellow players. To his left sat Lady Evelyn Marwood, an heiress whose sapphire necklace glinted like a constellation. Her auburn hair was swept into an elegant chignon, but her fingers toyed with the cigarette holder, betraying a flicker of unease. Across from her was Colonel Reginald Hawthorne, his weathered face marked by a scar above his left brow, his military posture rigid despite the disgrace that had stripped him of his rank. Next to him, Clara Henshaw, a journalist with ink-stained fingers and eyes that missed nothing, tapped a pencil against her lips. The fifth player, a wiry man with a sallow complexion and darting eyes, introduced himself only as Mr. Vale. His cheap suit clashed with the suite's opulence, yet his confidence suggested he belonged. The dealer shuffled a deck of cards with hypnotic precision, the cards whispering secrets only he could hear. "The game is Texas Hold'em," he announced, "but tonight we play for more than chips. Each of you has something to lose and something to gain." Poirot's fingers steepled, his mind racing. The note had promised a bet beyond money, and now the air thrummed with unspoken stakes. He observed Lady Evelyn's subtle glance at Vale, the Colonel's clenched jaw, Clara's too casual doodling on her notepad. Each player was a piece in a puzzle, and Poirot intended to solve it. The first hand began, chips clinking like coins in a traitor's purse. Poirot played conservatively, his bets calculated to observe rather than win. Lady Evelyn's laughter was too bright, Vale's bluffs too bold, and the Colonel's silence too heavy. Clara, meanwhile, watched Poirot as much as the cards, her pencil sketching patterns only she understood. As the clock struck 10, the atmosphere shifted. Vale, flushed with a winning hand, reached for his glass of cognac. His fingers trembled, and a bead of sweat traced his temple. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Monsieur Vale, you appear unwell," he said, softly. Vale laughed, a brittle sound. "Just the thrill of the game, Poirot." He raised his glass in a mock toast, sipped, and froze. His eyes widened, his breath hitched, and with a choking gasp, he collapsed, the glass shattering on the floor. Chaos erupted. Lady Evelyn screamed, the Colonel surged to his feet, and Clara scrambled for her notepad. The dealer remained seated, his expression unreadable. Poirot knelt beside Vale, his fingers probing the man's wrist. No pulse. The acrid scent of almonds clung to the spilled cognac. Cyanide. "Mon Dieu!" Poirot murmured, his voice steady despite the pandemonium. "This is no accident. This is murder." The hotel staff burst in, summoned by the commotion, followed by a portly police sergeant named Hargreaves. He surveyed the scene with a scowl, his moustache bristling. "Right! What's all this? Heart attack, was it?" Poirot rose, brushing his knees. "None, Sergeant. Poison. The cognac, I suspect. You will wish to secure the room and call for a doctor." Hargreaves snorted. "Poison?" "In Claridge's. Sounds like a toff's dramatics. Probably drank too much and keeled over." Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet indignation. "Monsieur, the little grey cells do not lie. The scent of almonds, the sudden collapse. These are the hallmarks of cyanide. I urge you to investigate." The sergeant waved him off. "We'll handle it, Mr. Fancy Detective. You lot, stay put till we sort this out." As the police cordoned off the room, Poirot's mind churned. Vale's death was no random act. It was a move in a larger game, one where the players were pawns and the stakes were lethal. He studied his companions. Lady Evelyn dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief, but her tears seemed rehearsed. The Colonel stared at the table, his scar stark against his pale face. Clara scribbled furiously, her gaze darting to Poirot. The dealer, meanwhile, slipped the deck into his pocket, his movements too casual. "Excusez-moi," Poirot said, approaching the dealer. "The cards, if you please. They may hold clues." The dealer's eyes narrowed, but he handed over the deck. Poirot fanned through it, noting a faint smudge on the ace of spades, a fingerprint perhaps. He pocketed the card discreetly, his mind alight with possibilities. The police, predictably, declared Vale's death an accident pending autopsy, citing his known heart condition, a detail Poirot found suspiciously convenient. As the players were dismissed, Poirot lingered, his gaze sweeping the room. A glint beneath the table caught his eye. A tiny glass vial, empty, its label scratched off. He slipped it into his handkerchief undetected. Outside, the fog had thickened, swallowing the streetlights. Lady Evelyn paused at the hotel's entrance, her fur stole slipping to reveal a tense shoulder. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "you're not like the others. You see things. Be careful what you see." Poirot bowed, slightly. "Madam, the eyes of Hercule Poirot miss nothing, nor do they fear." She vanished into the night, her heels clicking like a metronome. Poirot turned to Clara, who hovered nearby, her notepad clutched like a shield. "Miss Henshaw, you observed much tonight. Perhaps you share your impressions." Clara's lips quirked. "I'm a journalist, not a snitch. But I'll tell you this, Vale wasn't just a gambler. He was in deep with some dangerous people. Watch your back, Poirot." She melted into the fog, leaving Poirot alone with the Colonel, who stood rigid, lighting a cigarette. "Colonel Hawthorne," Poirot said, "you were silent during the game. Yet silence speaks loudly, no?" Hawthorne exhaled a plume of smoke. "I've seen death before, Poirot. This one's no different. Just a fool who played the wrong hand." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone mild. "But I wonder, monsieur, what hand you play." The Colonel's scar twitched, but he said nothing, striding into the mist. Poirot stood alone, the vial in his pocket a silent accusation. The game, he knew, had only begun. The anonymous note, the poisoned cognac, the players' secrets, they formed a tapestry of deceit, and Poirot would unravel it thread by thread. He returned to Whitehaven Mansions, the city's pulse fading behind him. In his study, he placed the vial and the ace of spades on his desk, their presence a challenge. A bet beyond money, he mused, his fingers tracing the serpent and spade seal. Hercule Poirot accepts. The night was still, but his mind was not. Vale's death was the opening gambit, and the other players, Lady Evelyn, Colonel Hawthorne, Clara Henshaw, and the dealer, each held cards they dared not show. Poirot vowed to expose them all, for justice, for truth, and for the thrill of the game. As the clock struck midnight, Poirot lit a lamp, its glow illuminating the note. He read it again, his resolve hardening. The Venetian suite had been a stage, and the murder a curtain-raiser. The next act awaited, and Hercule Poirot would not be caught off guard. The fog outside thickened, but within, Poirot's mind was clear. He would return to Claridge's at dawn, question the staff, and trace the vial's origin. The players would scatter, but he would find them. The game was afoot, and Hercule Poirot never lost. Chapter 2. The Hidden Hand. The morning after the fatal poker game at Claridge's Hotel, Hercule Poirot sat in his meticulously ordered apartment at Whitehaven Mansions, sipping a cup of steaming tisane. The delicate aroma of chamomile curled through the air, a stark contrast to the grim puzzle occupying his mind. The anonymous note that had lured him to the game lay unfolded on his polished mahogany desk. Its cryptic words, "A bet beyond money," etched in his memory. The death of Sir Reginald Harwood, the industrialist who had collapsed mid-hand, clutching a glass of poisoned brandy, was no accident, despite what the police claimed. Poirot's little grey cells buzzed with suspicion, and he resolved to unravel the truth. The telephone rang, its shrill tones slicing through the quiet. Poirot answered with his usual precision. "Oui, this is Hercule Poirot. Monsieur Poirot, it's Inspector Japp," came the familiar voice, gruff but tinged with unease. "I trust you're not still fussing over that Harwood business? The coroner's report is clear. Heart failure, exacerbated by alcohol. Case closed." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Heart failure, mon ami? Non, non. The heart of Sir Reginald was stopped, not by nature, but by a poison most deliberate. You observed, did you not, the faint bitter almond scent in his glass?" Japp sighed audibly. "You and your nose, Poirot. Look, we've got enough on our plates without chasing shadows. If you've got evidence, bring it to Scotland Yard. Otherwise, let it rest. Rest is for the guilty, Inspector, not for Hercule Poirot." He hung up gently, his resolve unshaken. The police might dismiss the case, but Poirot knew a murder when he saw one. Sir Reginald's death was merely the first card in a larger game, and he intended to play it to the end. His first task was to investigate the victim. Sir Reginald Harwood, a titan of British industry, had built an empire in steel and shipping, but whispers of unsavoury connections had trailed him for years. Poirot donned his overcoat, adjusted his Homburg hat, and hailed a taxi to Harwood's palatial residence in Belgravia. The mansion loomed like a fortress, its stone facade gleaming under the pale London sun. A butler, stiff as a tin soldier, greeted him at the door. "I am Hercule Poirot, here to pay respects to the late Sir Reginald," Poirot said, his voice smooth as velvet. The butler hesitated, then led him into a cavernous drawing-room adorned with gilt-framed portraits and Persian rugs. The air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and old money. As Poirot waited, he studied the room. A grand fireplace dominated one wall, its mantel cluttered with ornaments, a jade elephant, a silver cigarette case, a crystal decanter. His eyes lingered on a small ornate clock, its hands frozen at 3:17. Curious, a broken clock in a house of such precision. He tucked the observation away. The butler returned, followed by a woman whose elegance was matched only by her guarded demeanour. Lady Evelyn Warrender, the heiress from the poker game, glided into the room. Her auburn hair was swept into an impeccable chignon, and her emerald green dress shimmered like a forest at dusk. But Poirot's keen eyes caught the faint twitch of her ring finger, a nervous tick betraying her composure. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice cool as cut glass. "I didn't expect to see you here. Surely the police have settled matters." "Settled, no. Clarified. Perhaps not." Poirot bowed slightly. "I seek the truth, Lady Evelyn. You were at the game last night. You knew Sir Reginald well, n'est-ce pas?" Her lips tightened, but she nodded. "We were acquainted. Business dealings mostly. He was a generous man, but not without enemies. Enemies who might poison his brandy." Poirot's tone was mild, but his eyes gleamed. Lady Evelyn's finger twitched again. Poison! That's absurd. The man drank like a fish. His heart gave out, nothing more. Poirot tilted his head, studying her. And yet, the glass he drank from, it carried a scent most particular. You did not notice, perhaps, when you sat beside him. Her gaze flickered, a crack in her poise. I was preoccupied with the game. I noticed nothing. Curieux, Poirot murmured. The eyes of Lady Evelyn, so sharp, miss nothing, I think. He changed tack. Tell me, what was the nature of your business with Sir Reginald? She hesitated, then said, investments. He had a knack for lucrative ventures. We discussed a shipping deal in the Mediterranean. Nothing sinister. Poirot nodded, though he sensed she was weaving a careful tapestry of half-truths. Before he could press further, the butler reappeared, announcing a visitor. Lady Evelyn excused herself with a strange smile, leaving Poirot alone. Seizing the moment, he slipped into the study adjacent to the drawing-room, where Sir Reginald's private papers might hold answers. The study was a shrine to wealth and power. Leather-bound books lined the walls, and a massive oak desk anchored the room. Poirot's fingers danced over the desk, searching for hidden compartments. A faint click rewarded his efforts, revealing a concealed drawer. Inside lay a small safe, its dial gleaming like a challenge. Poirot, no stranger to locks, produced a set of delicate tools from his pocket and set to work. Minutes later, the safe yielded its secrets. A stack of ledgers, their pages filled with cryptic numbers and initials. He opened one, his eyes narrowing at the meticulous entries. Paris, 10,000 francs. J.V. Lisbon, 15,000 escudos. C.H. London, 5,000 pounds. E.W. The initials matched players from the poker game. Clara Henshaw, the journalist, Colonel Vane, and tellingly, Evelyn Warrender. These were no ordinary bets, but transactions of staggering sums tied to cities across Europe. A gambling ring, perhaps, but one with stakes far beyond cards. Poirot's reverie was interrupted by footsteps. He closed the safe, pocketed a single page from the ledger, and stepped back into the drawing-room just as Lady Evelyn returned. Her eyes flicked to the study door, suspicion glinting. "I trust you found the drawing-room to your liking," she said, her tone sharp. "Most charming," Poirot replied, unruffled. "But I must take my leave. The truth, it calls, you understand." As he stepped into the crisp Belgravia air, Poirot's mind raced. The ledger suggested a network, a conspiracy cloaked in the guise of gambling. Lady Evelyn's involvement was undeniable, but was she a pawn or a queen? Her nervous tick lingered in his thoughts, a telltale sign of secrets. He resolved to follow the ledger's trail, which pointed to a meeting at a Soho jazz club that very night. The Blue Note Jazz Club was a haze of cigarette smoke and syncopated rhythms. Tucked in a narrow Soho alley, its neon sign flickered like a heartbeat. Poirot, dressed in a discreet charcoal suit, blended into the crowd of bohemians and night owls. The air thrummed with a saxophone's wail, and couples swayed on the dance floor, oblivious to the undercurrents of danger. Poirot took a seat at the bar, ordering a mineral water to keep his senses sharp. His eyes scanned the room, landing on a corner table where Colonel Vane, the disgraced military man from the poker game, sat with a figure cloaked in shadow. The dealer, Poirot suspected, though the man's face remained obscured by a fedora's brim. Their conversation was hushed, but Poirot's acute hearing caught fragments. "The shipment must move by Friday," the colonel muttered, his voice taut. "If the Black Queen isn't secured, We're finished." The dealer's response was a low hiss. "Keep your nerve, Vane. The diamond's safe." Harwood was a loose end, nothing more. Poirot's pulse quickened. The Black Queen, a diamond, perhaps? A stolen gem tied to the bets? Before he could eavesdrop further, a commotion erupted near the stage. A waiter, young and wiry, had spilled a tray of drinks near the Colonel's table, drawing glares. The dealer's hand shot out, grabbing the waiter's wrist. "Watch yourself, boy," the dealer snarled. "Some things aren't meant to be overheard." The waiter stammered an apology, but Poirot saw fear in his eyes. The band struck up a louder tune, and the crowd surged, obscuring the scene. Then a shout, a brawl broke out, fists flying as glasses shattered. Poirot ducked behind the bar, his instincts screaming that this was no accident. The fight was a distraction, meant to silence the waiter. He pushed through the chaos, spotting the waiter fleeing toward a back exit. Poirot followed, his cane tapping a determined rhythm. In the alley, the waiter was cornered by two burly men, their faces masked by scarves. Poirot acted swiftly, swinging his cane to trip one assailant, who crashed into a pile of crates. The second lunged, but Poirot sidestepped, his agility belying his age. "Run, mon jeune ami!" Poirot urged the waiter, who needed no second prompting. The boy darted away, but not before pressing a crumpled note into Poirot's hand. "The Black Queen!" he whispered, then vanished into the night. Poirot unfolded the note under a flickering street lamp. It read simply, "The Black Queen hides in plain sight. Trust no one." His mind whirled. The diamond was the key, a prize worth killing for. But who held it, and why? The Colonel's words, the dealer's menace, Lady Evelyn's lies, they wove a tapestry of deceit, and Poirot was determined to unravel it. He returned to his apartment, the ledger page burning a hole in his pocket. By lamplight, he pored over the cryptic entries, his fingers tracing the coded sums. One entry caught his eye. "Soho, £20,000, BQ." The Black Queen again. Using a cipher technique he'd learned from a French cryptographer, Poirot decoded the entry, revealing a date and time. Tomorrow night, at a pawn shop known as Grimsby's Emporium. The game was afoot, and Poirot felt the thrill of the chase. The diamond, the bets, the murder, they were pieces of a puzzle only his little grey cells could solve. As he sipped his tisane, he pictured Lady Evelyn's twitching finger, the Colonel's furtive whispers, the dealer's shadowed menace. The Black Queen was out there, hiding in plain sight, and Poirot would find it, no matter the cost. The next day, Poirot prepared for his visit to Grimsby's Emporium, a dingy pawnshop in a labyrinth of Soho backstreets. He dressed plainly, trading his usual finery for a nondescript tweed coat to avoid attention. The shop's GRV window displayed a jumble of tarnished jewellery, dusty violins, and faded photographs. The pawnbroker, a wiry man with a ferret-like face, eyed Poirot warily as he entered. "Monsieur Grimsby, I presume?" Poirot said, his tone disarming. "I am Hercule Poirot, a collector of curiosities. I seek a particular item, a gem perhaps, of exceptional rarity." Grimsby's eyes darted nervously. "Don't know what you mean, sir. Just trinkets here, nothing special." Poirot leaned closer, his voice low. "A diamond, monsieur. One called the Black Queen, perhaps?" Grimsby paled, his hands trembling. I might have seen something like it. Big gem, dark as night. But it's gone, sold to a private buyer. I don't know who." Before Poirot could press further, a crack split the air, a gunshot. He dove behind a display case as glass shattered, The bullet had grazed his hat, a near miss that sent his heart racing. Grimsby scrambled out a back door, vanishing into the maze of alleys. Poirot rose, brushing dust from his coat, and surveyed the scene. On the floor lay a monogrammed cigarette case, its silver surface etched with the initials C.H. Clara Henshaw, the journalist. Poirot's lips curled. Clara had been at the poker game, her sharp eyes missing nothing, yet she denied involvement. The cigarette case suggested otherwise. Was she a player in this deadly game, or another pawn? Poirot pocketed the case, his mind alight with possibilities. The trail led to Clara Henshaw, and he would confront her tomorrow. For now, he stepped into the night, the weight of the ledger page and the waiter's note pressing against him. The Black Queen was out there, a glittering prize in a game of life and death. Hercule Poirot, with his unmatched intellect, would not fold. The hand was his to play. Chapter 3. Shadows in the Smoke. The fog hung low over London's cobbled streets, a shroud of mist curling through the narrow alleys of Soho, like the breath of some restless spirit. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a charcoal overcoat and polished shoes, stepped lightly over a puddle, his silver-tipped cane tapping a precise rhythm against the pavement. The night was alive with sound, distant laughter, the clink of glasses, the faint wail of a saxophone spilling from a basement club. His destination, the Blue Cat Jazz Club, glowed dimly ahead, its neon sign flickering like a beacon in the haze. Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat, his sharp grey eyes scanning the street. The decoded ledger entry from the industrialist's safe had led him here, to a place where secrets were traded as freely as drinks. The mention of a secret meeting intrigued him, not for its vagueness, but for its audacity. Whoever had penned those coded lines assumed no one would dare follow the trail to this den of vice and rhythm. They had underestimated Hercule Poirot. He paused at the club's entrance, a heavy wooden door guarded by a burly man with a scar snaking across his cheek. The doorman's eyes narrowed, sizing up the diminutive Belgian with a skepticism born of too many nights spent turning away troublemakers. "Name?" the doorman growled, his voice like gravel underfoot. "Hercule Poirot," he replied, his tone clipped yet polite, as if announcing himself to a royal court. "I'm expected." The doorman's brow furrowed, but a quick glance at a crumpled list in his pocket seemed to satisfy him. He jerked his thumb toward the door. "Down the stairs. Don't cause a fuss." Poirot inclined his head, a faint smile tugging at his moustache. "Monsieur, I am the very soul of discretion." The air inside the Blue Cat was thick with smoke and the scent of gin, a heady mix that clung to the senses. The club was a cavern of shadows, its low ceiling draped with velvet curtains that muffled the din of conversation. A quartet on a small stage coaxed sultry notes from a trumpet, piano, bass and drums, their music weaving through the crowd like a living thing. Patrons lounged at tables or leaned against the bar, their faces half hidden in the dim light. Aristocrats slumming it, gamblers with hungry eyes, and women in sequined dresses who moved with the grace of predators. Poirot's gaze swept the room, cataloguing details with the precision of a watchmaker. A couple in the corner whispered too urgently to be lovers. A man in a pinstriped suit slipped a folded note to a waiter, who pocketed it without a glance. And there, at a table near the stage, sat Colonel Reginald Harrow, his weathered face taut with tension. Opposite him was a figure Poirot recognized from the poker game at Claridge's. The dealer, cloaked in a dark suit, his face obscured by the brim of a fedora. Their conversation was low, urgent, their heads bent close like conspirators. Poirot chose a table in the shadows, far enough to avoid notice, but close enough to observe. He ordered a tisane, much to the waiter's amusement, and settled in, his ears attuned to the rhythm of the club. The music swelled, a trumpet solo piercing the haze, and Poirot's mind worked in tandem, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. The industrialist's death, the coded ledgers, the whispered meeting, each was a thread in a tapestry of deceit, and Poirot was determined to unravel it. The colonel's voice, rough with years of barked orders, carried faintly over the music. "Too risky, I tell you. They're on to us." The dealer's response was a low murmur, his words indistinct but his tone sharp, commanding. Poirot leaned forward, straining to catch more, when a sudden movement at the bar caught his eye. A young waiter, no older than 20, with a mop of unruly brown hair, was staring at the colonel's table with an intensity that bordered on reckless. His hands fumbled with a tray of glasses, his eyes darting nervously. Poirot's moustache twitched. The boy was no mere bystander. He knew something, or someone wanted him to know nothing. The music shifted, the quartet launching into a frenetic number that sent couples to the dance floor. The crowd thickened, bodies swaying, and Poirot used the chaos to edge closer to the colonel's table. He caught a snatch of the dealer's words. "The Black Queen. Safe for now, but we need to move it." Poirot's pulse quickened. The Black Queen. A chess piece? A code? A person? His mind raced through possibilities, each more tantalizing than the last. He was about to inch closer when a commotion erupted near the bar. The young waiter had dropped his tray, glass shattering across the floor. A burly patron, red-faced and unsteady, loomed over him, shouting about spilled gin. The boy stammered apologies, but the man grabbed his collar, yanking him forward. The crowd parted, sensing a fight, and Poirot's instincts flared. This was no accident. The timing was too precise, the aggression too sudden. He rose, cane in hand, and moved swiftly through the throng. The patron raised a fist, but before it could land, Poirot's cane tapped sharply against the man's wrist. The drunk yelped, releasing the waiter, who stumbled back, wide-eyed. "Pardon, monsieur," Poirot said smoothly, his voice cutting through the din. "I believe you have had enough excitement for one evening." The man blinked, momentarily thrown by Poirot's calm authority. Before he could retort, the club's bouncers descended, hauling the drunk toward the exit. The crowd murmured, then returned to their drinks and dances, the incident forgotten. But Poirot's attention was on the waiter, who was trembling, his eyes locked on Poirot with a mix of fear and gratitude. "Come, mon ami," Poirot said softly, guiding the boy to a quieter corner near the stage. "You are unharmed, oui?" The waiter nodded, swallowing hard. "To thank you, sir. I didn't mean to—" "There is no need for explanations," Poirot interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "But I suspect you know more than you serve with your drinks. Tell me, what is this Black Queen?" The boy's eyes widened, his breath catching. "How did you—" Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Hercule Poirot hears much and sees more. Speak quickly before those who watch us grow impatient." The waiter glanced nervously at the colonel's table, where the dealer was now alone, the colonel having slipped away during the commotion. It's not a what, sir. It's a who, or maybe a what. I don't know." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I heard them talk about it last week. The Black Queen's worth a fortune, they said. Hidden where no one would think to look." Poirot's mind clicked like the gears of a safe. "And where is this hiding place?" The boy shook his head. "I don't know, I swear. But they mentioned a ship, the Étoile Noire. It's docked at Tilbury, leaving tomorrow night." Before Poirot could press further, a scream cut through the music. The quartet faltered, notes dying in the air. All eyes turned to the bar, where a woman in a red dress clutched her throat, her face contorted in pain. She collapsed, her glass rolling across the floor, its contents spilling like dark ink. Panic erupted. Patrons shouted, some rushing for the exit, others crowding around the fallen woman. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Another poisoning, here, now. The coincidence was too stark. He glanced at the waiter, who was frozen, his face pale. "Stay here," Poirot ordered, moving toward the chaos. He knelt beside the woman, his fingers brushing her wrist. Her pulse was faint, erratic, her lips moved, forming soundless words, and Poirot leaned closer, catching a faint whisper. "The Queen! Beware!" She fell still, her eyes glassy. Poirot stood, his expression grim. The crowd parted as two constables pushed through, their truncheons drawn. "Clear out!" one barked. "This place is shut down!" Poirot stepped back, his mind racing. The woman's death was no accident, and the waiter's clue about the Étoile Noire was now his only lead. He turned to find the boy, but the corner was empty. The waiter had vanished. The police cordoned off the club, herding patrons into the foggy street. Poirot lingered near the entrance, his eyes scanning for the colonel or the dealer, but both had melted into the night. He hailed a cab, his thoughts a whirlwind. The Black Queen was no mere metaphor. It was the key to this deadly game, and it was tied to a ship bound for distant shores. The cab rattled toward his apartment, the city's lights blurring through the window. Poirot's fingers drummed on his cane, his mind piecing together the night's events. The ledger, the jazz club, the poisoned woman, the missing waiter, all were connected, but the pattern remained elusive. The Étoile Noire was his next move, but he knew the docks were a dangerous place where shadows held knives and secrets were guarded with blood. He arrived at his apartment, the familiar order of his rooms a stark contrast to the chaos of Soho. He lit a single lamp and poured a tisane, the steam curling like the fog outside. On his desk, he spread out his notes, sketching a diagram of the players. The industrialist, dead. Lady Evelyn, evasive. The colonel, desperate. The dealer, cunning. The journalist, Clara, still an enigma. And now the waiter, a fleeting witness to a conspiracy. The Black Queen, he mused, was no ordinary prize. The waiter's words suggested a fortune, but the woman's dying warning hinted at danger beyond mere wealth. A diamond? A relic? A person? Poirot's instincts leaned toward the improbable. A gem, perhaps, hidden in plain sight, its value masked by clever misdirection. He sipped his tisane, the warmth grounding him. Tomorrow he would visit the docks, but not alone. He needed an ally, someone with access to places his polished shoes could not tread. Clara Henshaw, the journalist, came to mind. Her sharp mind and questionable motives made her a risky partner, but risk was the currency of this case. Poirot rose, crossing to his window. The fog pressed against the glass, a reminder of the murk he navigated. He smiled faintly, his moustache curling. "The Black Queen," he murmured. "You will not elude Hercule Poirot for long." The next morning, London awoke under a grey sky, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Poirot donned a fresh suit, his movements precise as he adjusted his tie. He telephoned Clara Henshaw, arranging to meet at a discreet cafe near the Strand. She arrived promptly, her auburn hair tucked under a cloche hat, her eyes wary but curious. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, sliding into the chair opposite him. "You're up early for a man who spent the night in Soho." "And you, Mademoiselle Henshaw, are remarkably well informed," Poirot replied, his tone light but probing. "Tell me, what do you know of the Étoile Noire?" Clara's fingers tightened on her coffee cup, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "The Étoile Noire? It's a cargo ship, French-owned, docked at Tilbury. Why?" Poirot leaned forward, his voice low. "Because, mademoiselle, it is tied to the Black Queen, a secret that has already claimed 2 lives. I require your assistance at the docks tonight. Your resourcefulness may prove invaluable." Clara hesitated, her journalist's instincts warring with caution. "You think I'm foolish enough to wade into a murder case with you?" "I think," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming, "that you are too curious to refuse." She laughed, a sharp, reluctant sound. "You're a devil, Poirot. Fine, but if we're walking into a trap, you owe me the scoop of the century." "Agreed," Poirot said, extending his hand. "But be warned, mademoiselle. The shadows in this game are long, and they do not forgive." The Tilbury docks were a maze of cranes, crates, and rusted hulls, the air thick with the tang of salt and oil. Night had fallen, and the Étoile Noire loomed against the skyline, its silhouette stark against the moonless sky. Poirot and Clara moved silently, their footsteps muffled by the creak of ships and the distant shouts of dock workers. Clara had secured a map of the docks from a contact at her newspaper, and they navigated to the Étoile Noire's berth. The ship was a hulking freighter, its deck quiet save for a single guard smoking near the gangway. Poirot's eyes scanned the scene, noting the crates stacked haphazardly nearby, perfect cover for an ambush. "Stay low," he whispered, leading Clara behind a pile of cargo. "We must find the cargo hold. If the Black Queen is aboard, it will be hidden there." They crept closer, using the shadows to their advantage. The guard flicked his cigarette into the water and turned away, giving them a narrow window. Poirot's cane tapped lightly against a crate, testing for hollow spaces, but Clara tugged his sleeve, pointing to a hatch partially ajar. "Entrance," she mouthed. Poirot nodded, his heart steady despite the danger. They slipped through the hatch, descending a rusted ladder into the ship's belly. The hold was a cavern of crates and barrels, the air damp and heavy. A single lantern swung overhead, casting eerie shadows. Clara pulled a flashlight from her coat, its beam cutting through the gloom. "If I were hiding a fortune," she whispered, "I'd pick the least obvious spot. That crate in the corner, too plain to notice." Poirot's eyes followed her beam. The crate was unremarkable, its wood weathered and unmarked. Too unremarkable, perhaps. He approached, his fingers tracing the edges, and found a false panel. With a gentle push, it slid open, revealing a velvet-lined box. Inside gleamed a single black diamond, its facets catching the lantern's light like a star in the void. "The Black Queen," Poirot breathed, lifting the gem. It was heavier than it looked, its surface cool against his skin. He turned it, noticing a faint engraving, a crest, unfamiliar but unmistakably aristocratic. Clara's eyes widened. "That's worth a king's ransom. But why hide it here?" Before Poirot could answer, footsteps echoed above. heavy, deliberate, not the casual tread of a sailor. He pocketed the diamond and pulled Clara behind a stack of barrels. The hatch creaked open, and a figure descended, cloaked in darkness. The dealer's voice, smooth and cold, filled the hold. "You've been careless, Poirot," he said, his shadow stretching across the crates. "Did you think I wouldn't anticipate your meddling?" Poirot's mind raced. The dealer had tracked them, but how? The waiter? A mole at the club? He stepped into the light, his cane raised like a sceptre. "Monsieur, you underestimate the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot. The diamond is mine, and your game is nearly over." The dealer laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Bold words for a man trapped in a cage. Hand over the Queen, or your journalist friend learns how cold the Thames can be." Clara tensed beside him, but Poirot's voice was steady. "A threat, monsieur. How predictable. But tell me, why does this diamond matter so much to you?" The dealer's eyes glinted beneath his fedora. "It's not the diamond, Poirot. It's what it unlocks. Secrets worth more than gold. Surrender it, and you might live." Poirot's moustache curled in a faint smile. "Then let us negotiate, oui?" But first, a small distraction. He tapped his cane sharply against a barrel, the sound echoing like a gunshot. The dealer flinched, and in that moment, Clara hurled her flashlight, striking his shoulder. He staggered, cursing, and Poirot seized the chance, pulling Clara toward a side hatch. They burst onto the deck, the night air sharp in their lungs. "Run!" Poirot shouted, as shouts and footsteps erupted behind them. They sprinted across the dock, weaving through crates, the diamond heavy in Poirot's pocket. A gunshot cracked, splintering wood inches from his head, but he didn't falter. Clara's hand gripped his arm, her breath ragged but determined. They reached a warehouse, ducking inside as their pursuers' shouts faded into the fog. Poirot leaned against a wall, his heart pounding but his mind clear. The diamond was in his possession, but the game was far from over. The dealer's words echoed in his mind. It's what it unlocks. The crest on the diamond was a clue, one that pointed to a larger prize, perhaps the artifact hinted at in the jazz club. Clara caught her breath, her eyes blazing. "That was too close, Poirot." "What now?" He held up the diamond, its black heart gleaming. "Now, mademoiselle, we follow the trail. This queen is but a pawn in a greater game, and Hercule Poirot does not lose at chess." The chapter's end left Poirot with more questions than answers, but the Black Queen was his, a tangible piece of the puzzle. The Étoile Noire faded into the fog behind them, its secrets partially unveiled. The crest, the dealer's threats, the woman's dying words, all pointed to a conspiracy that stretched beyond London, its roots tangled in power and greed. Poirot knew the docks had been a gamble, but the risk had paid off, for now. He and Clara slipped into the night, the diamond a heavy promise in his pocket. Tomorrow he would trace the crest, confront the journalist's half-truths, and hunt for the waiter who had vanished like smoke. The Black Queen was no mere gem. It was a key, and Poirot was determined to find the lock it opened, no matter the cost. Chapter 4. The Diamond's Trail. The fog clung to London streets like a conspirator's whisper, shrouding the narrow alleys of Whitechapel in a veil of secrecy. Hercule Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat, its brim casting a shadow over his sharp eyes, as he navigated the cobbled path toward a dimly lit pawnbroker's shop. The air was thick with the scent of damp coal, and the faint tang of gin from a nearby tavern. His polished shoes clicked rhythmically, a metronome to his racing thoughts. The clue of the Black Queen, whispered by the terrified waiter in the smoky jazz club, had led him here, to this unassuming storefront with its peeling sign, Goldstein's Curios and Loans. The rare diamond tied to the deadly gambling ring was within reach, or so he hoped. Inside, the shop was a labyrinth of cluttered shelves, each groaning under the weight of tarnished silverware, cracked porcelain, and forgotten heirlooms. A single gas lamp flickered, casting jagged shadows across the room. Behind the counter stood Isaac Goldstein, a wiry man with a hooked nose and eyes that darted like a fox caught in a trap. His fingers, stained with ink and tobacco, fidgeted with a tarnished pocket watch as Poirot approached. "Monsieur Goldstein," Poirot began, his voice smooth as polished oak, "I am told you are a man who deals in uncommon treasures. I seek one such item, a diamond, black as midnight, known in certain circles as the Black Queen." Goldstein's hand froze mid-motion, the watch slipping from his grasp to clatter on the counter. "Don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, his East End accent thick with unease. "Diamonds. I deal in trinkets, not fairy tales." Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle sign of his amusement. "Come now, monsieur. The little grey cells, they do not lie. You have handled this gem, or know of its passage. Speak plainly, and perhaps we avoid complications." Goldstein's eyes flicked to the shop's grimy window, as if expecting an unseen watcher. He leaned forward, lowering his voice to a hoarse whisper. "All right, mister. I might have seen something like it. Big, dark, cursed-looking thing. Came through here a week ago. Bloke who brought it didn't give a name, just said it was hot and needed a quick sale. I sent him to a buyer in Spitalfields. That's all I know." "Who was this buyer?" Poirot pressed, his tone firm but calm, like a surgeon's scalpel. Goldstein hesitated, wiping sweat from his brow. I don't know his name. Foreign chap, fancy suit, spoke with an accent, Russian maybe. Met him at the Black Lion pub, near the market. That's all I got, I swear." Before Poirot could probe further, a sharp crack shattered the silence. The shop's window exploded inward, glass shards raining across the floor. Poirot ducked instinctively, his hat grazing the edge of a bullet that embedded itself in a wooden beam behind him. Goldstein yelped, diving beneath the counter. Outside, the fog swallowed the sniper's silhouette, leaving only the echo of retreating footsteps. Poirot rose, brushing glass from his coat, his heart steady despite the near miss. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "it seems the Black Queen is a prize, worth killing for." He scanned the chaos, his eyes catching a glint among the debris. A monogrammed cigarette case, silver and sleek, inscribed with the initials C. H. Clara Henshaw, the sharp-eyed journalist. His lips tightened. Betrayal or a clumsy frame? The question gnawed at him. Goldstein, trembling, peeked over the counter. "You've brought trouble to my door, mister. Get out, or I'll call the coppers." Poirot raised a placating hand. "Calm yourself, monsieur. The police, they would only muddy the waters. I shall leave. But first, the name of the pub again?" "Black Lion," Goldstein snapped. "Now go!" Poirot stepped into the fog, his mind racing. The cigarette case was a clue, deliberate or not. Clara's involvement was undeniable, but her role, victim, pawn, or predator, remained elusive. The Black Lion in Spitalfields was his next destination, but the sniper's attack suggested he was being watched, hunted. He tightened his grip on his walking stick, its concealed blade a reassuring weight. The Black Lion pub was a squat, soot-stained building nestled in the heart of Spitalfields Market. Its windows glowed with amber light, and the raucous laughter of dock workers and costermongers spilled into the street. Poirot entered, his impeccable suit drawing curious glances from the rough-hewn patrons. The air was thick with pipe smoke and the sour reek of ale. At the bar, a burly publican polished glasses with a rag that looked dirtier than the counter. Poirot approached, his demeanour unruffled. "Good evening, monsieur. I seek a gentleman who frequents this establishment. A Russian, perhaps, with a taste for fine suits and finer gems." The publican squinted, sizing Poirot up. "Russian, eh? Might be talking about Victor. Comes in now and then, always flashing cash. Keeps to himself, though. What's it to you?" "A matter of mutual interest," Poirot replied, sliding a shilling across the counter. "Where might I find this Victor?" The publican pocketed the coin. "He's got a room upstairs, but he ain't here now. Left an hour ago. Said he had business at the old tannery on Brick Lane. Shady type, if you ask me." Poirot nodded, committing the details to memory. The tannery on Brick Lane, a derelict relic of London's industrial past, was an odd place for a man dealing in diamonds. He thanked the publican and stepped outside, the fog thicker now, curling around gaslights like ghostly fingers. The walk to Brick Lane was fraught with tension. Every shadow seemed to move, every footfall an echo of pursuit. Poirot's senses were razor-sharp, attuned to the slightest anomaly. As he neared the tannery, its crumbling facade loomed through the mist, windows boarded, walls streaked with grime. The faint glow of a lantern flickered from within, a beacon in the gloom. He slipped through a side door, the hinges creaking ominously. Inside, the air was heavy with the stench of old leather and mildew. Crates and barrels littered the floor, relics of a forgotten trade. Poirot moved silently, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. Voices echoed from deeper within. Low, urgent, accented. "The diamond's gone!" a man hissed, his voice unmistakably Russian. "Someone's on to us. Goldstein talked, I know it." "Then we eliminate the loose ends," another voice replied, colder, clipped, an English accent aristocratic, starting with that meddling detective. Poirot's pulse quickened, but his expression remained impassive. He edged closer, peering through a gap in a stack of crates. Two men stood in a pool of lantern light. One, presumably Victor, was broad-shouldered, with a scar slashing across his cheek. The other, tall and elegant, wore a tailored coat that screamed wealth. Lady Evelyn's face flashed in Poirot's mind. Could this be her contact? The man's features were obscured by shadow, but his posture exuded authority. Before Poirot could hear more, a floorboard creaked under his weight. The men froze, hands darting to their pockets. "Who's there?" Victor growled, drawing a pistol. Poirot stepped into the light, his hands raised, his voice calm. "Monsieur, there is no need for violence. Hercule Poirot seeks only answers, not bloodshed." Victor's eyes narrowed. "The detective, you're a fool to come here." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone light, "but a fool who knows of the Black Queen and its price." The aristocratic man stepped forward, his face still partially hidden. "You're out of your depth, Poirot. Walk away, or you'll find yourself at the bottom of the Thames." Poirot's moustache curved slightly. "A threat, monsieur? How unimaginative! Tell me, what is the diamond to you? A trinket, or a key to something greater?" The man's lips twitched, but he said nothing. Victor, less restrained, lunged forward, pistol raised. Poirot sidestepped with surprising agility, his walking stick cracking against Victor's wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. Before the aristocratic man could react, Poirot scooped up the pistol and levelled it at them. "Now, monsieur," he said, his voice steel beneath silk, "we talk." But the aristocratic man was already moving, tossing a crate to the ground. It burst open, spilling a cloud of flour that choked the air. Poirot coughed, momentarily blinded, as the men vanished into the shadows. When the dust settled, they were gone, leaving only a single clue. A torn scrap of paper, scrawled with the words Regent's Canal, midnight. Poirot pocketed the note, his mind whirring. The canal at midnight suggested a rendezvous, perhaps a handoff of the diamond or something more sinister. But the cigarette case still gnawed at him. Clara's initials, left at the pawnbroker's. Was she working with these men? Or had she been there before him, chasing the same trail? The night was alive with the clatter of hooves and the distant wail of a foghorn as Poirot made his way to Regent's Canal. The waterway gleamed like a ribbon of ink under the gaslights, flanked by warehouses and narrow towpaths. He arrived early, concealing himself behind a stack of barrels, his eyes scanning the darkness. The fog was his ally now, cloaking him from prying eyes. At precisely midnight, a figure emerged, a woman, her silhouette unmistakable. Clara Henshaw, her trench coat pulled tight against the chill, her auburn hair catching the light. She moved cautiously, clutching a notebook, her gaze darting nervously. Poirot watched, his suspicions warring with his instincts. Was she here to meet the conspirators, or to expose them? Before he could decide, a low whistle cut through the fog. Clara froze, then hurried toward a narrow bridge. Poirot followed, silent as a spectre. Under the bridge, Victor waited, alone this time, his scar glinting in the moonlight. Clara approached, her voice low but firm. "I've got what you wanted," she said, holding up the notebook. "Names, dates, transactions, but I want out. This story's too big for me." Victor sneered. "You don't get to walk away, Miss Henshaw. Hand it over." Poirot stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "Mademoiselle Henshaw, I believe you have some explaining to do." Clara gasped, spinning to face him. "Poirot! I didn't know you were here." "Evidently," he said dryly. "And yet, here we are. You carry a notebook of secrets, and a cigarette case bearing your initials lies at the scene of an attempted murder. Explain, s'il vous plaît." Victor lunged, but Poirot was faster, raising the stolen pistol. "Stay where you are, monsieur. The game is not yet over." Clara's hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "I'm not with them, Poirot. I've been investigating the gambling ring for months. The cigarette case. I lost it weeks ago. Someone's framing me. I came here to trade this notebook for my safety, but I swear I'm trying to stop them." Poirot studied her, his eyes piercing. Her fear seemed genuine, but her story was a tapestry of half-truths. "And the Black Queen?" he asked. "It's more than a diamond," she whispered. "It's a symbol, a marker for a network of bets that could ruin half of London's elite. I don't know where it is, but they do." Victor laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You're both dead if you keep digging. The diamond's just the beginning." Before Poirot could respond, a motorboat roared to life on the canal, its engine shattering the silence. Victor bolted, leaping onto the boat as it sped away. Poirot fired a warning shot, but the fog swallowed the craft. Clara sank to her knees, clutching the notebook. Poirot knelt beside her, his tone softer now. "Mademoiselle, if you are to be trusted, you must tell me everything. No more secrets." She nodded, tears streaking her face. "There's an auction, Poirot. Tomorrow night, at a manor in Kent. The diamond might be there, or at least its buyer. I was going to go alone, but I need your help." Poirot rose, offering her a hand. "Then we shall go together, mademoiselle. But know this, Hercule Poirot trusts cautiously and forgives rarely. Betray me, and you will regret it." As they left the canal, the fog seemed to tighten around them, a reminder of the dangers ahead. The Black Queen was more than a gem. It was a key to a conspiracy that stretched far beyond London's underworld. Poirot's resolve hardened. He would confront Clara fully at the manor, but first he needed to survive the night. The journey to Kent was a blur of rattling trains and tense silence. Clara sat across from Poirot, her notebook clutched like a talisman. He studied her, noting the way her fingers traced the leather cover, the faint tremor in her hands. She was frightened, but determined, a journalist chasing a story that could make or break her. Or perhaps, he mused, a pawn in a game she barely understood. The manor loomed on the horizon, its turrets piercing the dawn sky. Poirot's thoughts turned to the auction, the diamond, and the shadowy figures pulling the strings. The cigarette case, the sniper, the Russian, all pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit. But Hercule Poirot was no ordinary man. His little grey cells were at work, and the truth, however elusive, would not escape him. Chapter 5. The Reporter's Gambit. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cobbled streets of Bloomsbury, where Hercule Poirot stood outside a modest tea-house, his gloved fingers adjusting the brim of his Homburg hat. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked pavement and the distant hum of London's pulse. His grey eyes, sharp as ever, scanned the bustling crowd for Clara Henshaw, the journalist whose cigarette case, monogrammed with her initials, had been found at the scene of the pawnbroker's disappearance. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the mosaic of clues. A poisoned industrialist, a rare diamond known as the Black Queen, a sniper's bullet, and now this enigmatic reporter who seemed to hover at the edges of the mystery like a moth circling a flame. Clara had agreed to meet him here, at the Rose and Thorn Tea House, a quaint establishment known for its discretion and overstuffed armchairs. Poirot, ever punctilious, had arrived precisely at 4 o'clock, his silver watch ticking in rhythm with his thoughts. The cigarette case troubled him. Its presence at the pawnbroker's shop suggested either carelessness or a deliberate plant, and Clara Henshaw did not strike him as careless. She was a woman of ambition, her articles in the Clarion marked by a dogged pursuit of truth, yet her guarded demeanour at their first encounter hinted at secrets. Was she a pawn in this deadly game, or was she playing her own hand? The tea-house door jingled, and Clara emerged, her auburn hair tucked beneath a cloche hat, her green eyes darting nervously before settling on Poirot. She wore a tailored coat, its deep blue fabric a shade too elegant for a journalist's salary, and her expression was a curious blend of defiance and unease. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice crisp but tinged with caution, "I hope I haven't kept you waiting." "Not at all, Mademoiselle Henshaw," Poirot replied, his tone smooth as polished oak. "Punctuality is a virtue, and you have honoured it. Shall we?" He gestured toward the tea-house, and they stepped inside, where the air was warm with the aroma of Earl Grey and scones. The interior was a haven of quietude, with lace curtains diffusing the light into soft halos. Poirot selected a corner table, far from prying ears, and ordered a pot of chamomile tea for himself and a black coffee for Clara. As the waitress retreated, he leaned forward, his moustache twitching slightly. "Mademoiselle, we must speak frankly. The cigarette case, your cigarette case, was found at the pawnbroker's shop, moments after a sniper's bullet nearly made Poirot a permanent resident of the pavement. What do you know of this?" Clara's fingers tightened around her handbag, her knuckles whitening. "I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I don't smoke. That case isn't mine. Someone's trying to frame me." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of panic, like a deer catching the scent of a hunter. Poirot tilted his head, studying her. "A frame, you say? A curious choice to plant an item so personal. And yet, you were investigating this gambling ring, were you not? Your articles in the Clarion have danced perilously close to the truth. Tell me, what have you uncovered?" Clara hesitated, her gaze drifting to the window, where rain had begun to patter against the glass. "I've been chasing the story for months," she admitted finally. "The gambling ring isn't just about cards and money. It's a network, high society criminals, even foreign operatives. They're betting on more than poker hands. I heard whispers of a rare artifact, something called the Black Queen. I thought it was a metaphor until I saw your face at the jazz club. You know what it is, don't you?" Poirot's expression remained inscrutable, but his mind raced. The Black Queen, the diamond, was indeed the linchpin of this affair. A gem rumoured to be worth a king's ransom, and tied to a web of international intrigue. "Let us say," he replied, "that I am aware of its significance. But you, mademoiselle, have not answered my question. The cigarette case. If it is not yours, who would wish to implicate you?" Clara's lips parted, then closed. She reached for her coffee, her movements deliberate, as if buying time. "I don't know," she said at last, "but I have a lead. There's a secret auction happening tomorrow night at a manor in Buckinghamshire, Ravenswood Hall. The diamond might be there. I was planning to go to see what I could uncover. You could come with me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. An auction at a countryside manor was precisely the sort of clandestine gathering where the threads of this conspiracy might converge. But Clara's invitation felt too convenient, her story too neatly aligned with his own suspicions. Was she luring him into a trap, or was she genuinely seeking an ally? "A most interesting proposition," he said. "But first, mademoiselle, a question. Why trust Poirot with this? You could have gone alone, published your scoop, and claimed the glory." Clara's smile was wry, almost bitter. "Because I'm in over my head, Monsieur Poirot. I've been followed, my flat's been searched, and last night someone left a note under my door. Stop digging, or you'll be buried. I need someone who can see through the lies, someone like you." Before Poirot could respond, the tea-house's telephone rang, a shrill note cutting through the murmur of conversation. The waitress answered, then approached their table, her face apologetic. "Monsieur Poirot, there's a call for you." Poirot's brow furrowed. He had told no one he would be here. Excusing himself, he followed the waitress to the telephone, a heavy black apparatus on a side table. He lifted the receiver, his voice cautious. "This is Hercule Poirot." A distorted voice crackled through the line, low and menacing. "Fold now, Poirot, or lose everything. The game's bigger than you know." The line went dead before he could reply. Returning to the table, Poirot's expression was grim. Clara raised an eyebrow. "Bad news? Merely a reminder," Poirot said, "that the stakes in this game are high indeed. Very well, Mademoiselle Henshaw. I shall accompany you to this auction. But know this, Hercule Poirot trusts no one until the truth is revealed." The train to Buckinghamshire rattled through the dusk, its windows streaked with rain. Poirot and Clara sat in a private compartment, the clatter of the rails a steady counterpoint to their conversation. Clara had been reluctant to share more, but Poirot's gentle probing had elicited fragments of her story. A childhood in a struggling East End family, a knack for writing that had lifted her into journalism, and a burning ambition to expose corruption. Yet her reticence about the gambling ring suggested she was still holding cards close to her chest. As the countryside unfolded, Poirot's thoughts turned to the auction. Ravenswood Hall was a name he knew vaguely, an estate owned by the reclusive Lord Ashbourne, a man rumoured to dabble in antiquities and less savoury ventures. If the Black Queen was to resurface, a secret auction was the perfect stage. But the telephone call gnawed at him. Someone knew his movements, his plans. The dealer, perhaps? Or another player, hidden in the shadows? The train slowed, and Clara gathered her coat. "We're almost there," she said. "The Manor's a mile from the station. I've arranged a car." Poirot nodded, his fingers brushing the small notebook in his pocket, where he jotted clues: ledger codes, jazz club brawl, Black Queen, cigarette case, sniper, auction. Each piece was a thread, but the pattern remained elusive. "Mademoiselle," he said as they disembarked, "you will forgive Poirot if he remains vigilant. In a game such as this, even allies may hold hidden cards." Clara's smile was tight. "I wouldn't expect anything less." The car, a sleek black Daimler, waited at the station, its driver a taciturn man with a scar across his cheek. Poirot noted the man's calloused hands and the bulge of a concealed weapon beneath his coat. "A curious choice of chauffeur," he remarked to Clara as they settled into the back seat. "He's reliable," she said curtly. But her fingers drummed nervously on her handbag. The road to Ravenswood Hall wound through dense woods, the headlights slicing through the mist. Poirot's senses were alert, cataloguing every detail. The driver's occasional glances in the rearview mirror, the faint scent of tobacco clinging to Clara's coat, the distant hoot of an owl. As the manor loomed into view, a Gothic pile of turrets and ivy-clad stone, Poirot felt the weight of the game pressing closer. This was no mere auction. It was a gambit, and he was stepping onto the board. The car stopped at the manor's gates, where a liveried footman checked their invitations. Clara produced a gilded card, its edges embossed with a subtle crest. Poirot's sharp eyes caught the design, a queen's silhouette in black enamel. "Most intriguing," he murmured, but Clara pretended not to hear. Inside, the manor was a labyrinth of opulence. Chandeliers glittered, their light reflecting off polished mahogany and silk draperies. Guests milled about, their faces half hidden by masks, a nod to the evening's masquerade theme. Poirot, ever adaptable, had donned a simple black domino mask, his moustache a distinctive flourish beneath it. Clara, in a silver mask that accentuated her green eyes, blended effortlessly into the crowd. "Stay close," she whispered. "The auction's in a private room, but we need to find the host first." Poirot nodded, his gaze sweeping the room. He spotted Lady Evelyn, the glamorous heiress from the Claridge's poker game, her auburn curls unmistakable, even beneath a feathered mask. She was deep in conversation with a tall man, whose military bearing suggested the disgraced colonel. Their gestures were tense, their voices low. Poirot's instincts prickled. "Mademoiselle," he said to Clara, "observe. Our players are gathering." Before they could approach, a gong sounded, and a voice, smooth and commanding, echoed through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, the auction will begin shortly. Please proceed to the Crimson Salon." The crowd surged toward a set of double doors, and Poirot followed, his hand lightly on Clara's arm. The Crimson Salon was a smaller room, its walls draped in red velvet, its air heavy with cigar smoke and anticipation. A platform at the far end held a glass case, empty for now. Lord Ashbourne, a gaunt man with piercing blue eyes, stood beside it, his smile as sharp as a blade. "Welcome," he said, his voice carrying an undertone of menace. "Tonight, we offer treasures beyond compare, but first, a demonstration of trust." He clapped his hands, and a servant wheeled in a cart bearing a single item, a velvet cushion on which rested a cigarette case identical to the one found at the pawnbroker's. Poirot's heart quickened. Clara's breath caught, audible only to him. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "that's not mine, I swear it." "Silence, mademoiselle," Poirot murmured. "The game is afoot." Lord Ashbourne lifted the cigarette case, his fingers tracing its monogram. "A curious trinket," he said, his eyes scanning the room. "A gift from one of our players, perhaps? Or a warning?" His gaze lingered on Poirot, who met it with a bland smile. The auction began, with items paraded before the crowd. A jade statuette, a Renaissance dagger, a sapphire necklace. Poirot watched, noting the bidders' faces, their signals. Lady Evelyn bid aggressively on a painting, her ring finger twitching as it had at the poker game. The Colonel remained silent, his eyes fixed on the glass case. Clara, beside Poirot, scribbled notes in a small pad, her hand trembling slightly. Then the moment arrived. Lord Ashbourne unveiled the final lot, a black velvet box, opened to reveal a diamond that seemed to drink the light, the Black Queen. The room fell silent, the air electric with greed. Bids flew, but Poirot's attention was elsewhere. A figure in a hooded cloak slipped through a side door, unnoticed by all but him. "Clara," he said softly, "we must follow that shadow." She nodded, and they moved discreetly, weaving through the crowd. The side door led to a narrow corridor, its walls lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. The cloaked figure moved swiftly, vanishing around a corner. Poirot's steps were silent, his senses attuned to every creak and whisper. Clara followed, her breath uneven. The corridor opened into a library, its shelves towering to the ceiling. The figure stood before a fireplace, tossing papers into the flames. Poirot cleared his throat, and the figure spun, revealing a face half hidden by the hood. It was the pawnbroker, alive and terrified. "Monsieur," Poirot said, his voice calm but firm, "you have much to explain." The pawnbroker stammered, his hands raised. "I didn't want to disappear. They forced me, said they'd kill me if I talked." "Who?" Clara demanded, stepping forward. Before he could answer, a gunshot rang out, shattering a window. The pawnbroker dove behind a desk, and Poirot pulled Clara to the floor. Footsteps echoed in the corridor, then faded. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Poirot rose, dusting his coat. "It seems, mademoiselle, that our game has escalated. Monsieur le pawnbroker, you will tell Poirot everything, now." The pawnbroker, trembling, began to speak. Of a smuggling ring, of bets placed on stolen artifacts, of the Black Queen as a key to a greater prize. As he spoke, Poirot's mind assembled the puzzle, each piece clicking into place. The cigarette case, the sniper, the auction, all were moves in a grander scheme. And Clara, he realized, was both a player and a pawn. The chapter closed as they left the library, the pawnbroker in tow, the diamond's whereabouts still a mystery, but its significance clearer. Poirot's resolve hardened. The next move was his, and he would play it with precision. The night was far from over, and Ravenswood Hall held more secrets yet to be unveiled. Chapter 6. The Manners Masquerade. The night air was thick with the scent of jasmine and anticipation, as Hercule Poirot stepped from the chauffeured car onto the gravel drive of Haverford Manor. The sprawling estate, nestled in the rolling hills of Kent, glowed under the moon's pale gaze, its ivy-clad walls and towering chimneys exuding an air of timeless grandeur. Torches flickered along the path to the entrance, casting dancing shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of their own. Poirot adjusted the fur collar of his borrowed Russian count's attire. A sable-trimmed coat, a silk cravat, and a silver-tipped cane that felt both foreign and oddly fitting in his gloved hand. His moustache, meticulously waxed, gleamed under the torchlight, and his green eyes sparkled with the thrill of the chase. Beside him, Clara Henshaw, the sharp-eyed journalist, adjusted her own disguise. A sapphire-blue gown that shimmered like liquid starlight, paired with a feathered mask that obscured half her face. Her auburn hair was swept into an elegant chignon, but her fingers betrayed a faint tremble as she clutched her beaded purse. "This feels like stepping into a lion's den dressed as a peacock," she murmured, her voice low but edged with excitement. "Mon ami," Poirot replied, his tone as smooth as polished oak. "The lion does not devour the peacock if the peacock knows how to strut. Observe, listen, and trust in the little grey cells. Tonight, we play our parts to perfection." The invitation to the Manor's masked ball had come via a cryptic note slipped under Clara's door at her London flat, its elegant script promising a night of revelations, and mentioning the Black Queen, the rare diamond Poirot now knew was tied to the gambling ring's sinister bets. The note had been unsigned, but its wax seal bore a faint impression of a chess piece, confirming Poirot's suspicion that the diamond was the key to unravelling the conspiracy. The ball, he deduced, was a front for a secret auction, where the diamond, or a clever facsimile, would change hands. As they approached the Manor's grand doors, flanked by liveried footmen in powdered wigs, Poirot scanned the arriving guests. Men in black tails and women in glittering gowns swept past, their masks a riot of feathers, lace, and gold filigree. Laughter and the clink of champagne glasses spilled from within, but Poirot's keen senses detected an undercurrent of tension, like a violin string wound too tight. "The air, it hums with secrets," he whispered to Clara. "Stay close, but not too close. We must appear as strangers, yet allies." Inside, the ballroom was a spectacle of opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, casting prisms of light across the parquet floor. A string quartet played a haunting waltz, and masked dancers swirled in patterns that seemed almost choreographed, their movements precise yet guarded. Waiters glided through the crowd, offering silver trays of canapés and flutes of champagne that sparkled like liquid gold. Poirot's eyes darted from face to face, searching for familiar silhouettes among the disguises. The heiress, Lady Evelyn, was here, he was certain of it. Her nervous tic, that twitching ring finger, would betray her, mask or no mask. Clara, playing her role, drifted toward a group of guests near a marble fireplace. her laughter bright but calculated as she engaged a portly man in a harlequin mask. Poirot, meanwhile, adopted the aloof posture of a Russian aristocrat, his cane tapping lightly as he moved toward the edge of the ballroom. A balcony overlooked the gardens, and he stepped out, pretending to admire the moonlit topiaries while eavesdropping on a hushed conversation behind a velvet curtain. "You're certain it's the real thing?" a man's voice hissed, low and urgent. The accent was clipped, possibly German. "It's flawless," a woman replied, her tone smooth but laced with steel. "The Black Queen will fetch millions, but the buyer must be discreet." Poirot's heart quickened. The woman's voice was unmistakably Lady Evelyn's, her cadence betraying the same cultured arrogance he'd noted at Claridge's. He edged closer, his cane silent now, and peered through a gap in the curtain. Lady Evelyn, masked in emerald green with a cascade of peacock feathers, stood beside a tall man in a black domino mask, his posture rigid with authority. A diplomat, perhaps, or a broker for the auction. Their conversation turned to numbers, some so vast they could only pertain to the diamond or something equally priceless. Before Poirot could hear more, a hand grazed his shoulder. He turned, his expression composed, to find a woman in a silver mask, her lips painted a vivid crimson. "Count Volkov, I presume," she purred, her voice tinged with a French accent. "You seem lost in thought. Care to dance?" Poirot's mind raced. The invitation was a test. He was sure of it. Refusing might draw suspicion, but accepting risked losing sight of Lady Evelyn. He bowed, his smile as polished as his manners. "Enchanté, mademoiselle, but I fear my dancing days are behind me. Perhaps a stroll through the gardens instead." Her laugh was light, but her eyes, visible through the mask's slits, were sharp. A man who prefers moonlight to music? Intriguing. She linked her arm through his, guiding him toward the French doors. Poirot complied, his senses on high alert. This woman was no mere guest. Her grip was too firm, her steps too purposeful. Outside, the gardens were a maze of hedgerows and marble statues, the air cool and heavy with the scent of roses. The woman, whose name she said was Madame Lisette, chatted idly about the manor's history, but Poirot noted her glances toward the shadows, as if expecting someone. "You are not here for the dancing, I think," he said, his tone playful but probing. "A woman of your elegance seeks something more substantial, non?" Her lips twitched, but she didn't falter. "And you, Count? What brings a man of your stature to such a provincial affair?" "Curiosity," Poirot replied, twirling his cane. "I hear whispers of a rare gem, a diamond of unparalleled beauty. The Black Queen, they call it. Have you heard such whispers?" Madame Lisette's step faltered, just for a moment. "Rumours," she said airily. "This crowd loves its gossip. But if such a gem exists, it would be dangerous to pursue." Before Poirot could press further, a bell chimed from the ballroom, signalling the start of the auction. Guests began streaming toward a side chamber, their masks glinting in the torchlight. Poirot excused himself from Madame Lisette, whose eyes lingered on him a moment too long, and rejoined Clara near a gilded statue of Apollo. "Anything?" she whispered, her mask tilted to conceal her lips. "Lady Evelyn speaks of the diamond," Poirot murmured, "and a buyer. We must see this auction." The side chamber was smaller, its walls draped in crimson velvet, giving it the air of a clandestine theatre. A low platform held a podium where a man in a gold mask, the auctioneer, stood beside a glass case. Inside, a diamond sparkled, its facets catching the candlelight in a mesmerizing dance. The crowd murmured their excitement palpable, but Poirot's trained eye caught a flaw. The gem's hue was too uniform, its sparkle too perfect. "A fake," he whispered to Clara. "Clever, but not the Black Queen." "How can you tell?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "The true diamond has a flaw," Poirot said. "A tiny inclusion, like a teardrop, visible only under scrutiny. This one is glass, dressed to deceive." The bidding began, with sums climbing into the millions. Poirot watched Lady Evelyn, now seated near the front, her ring finger twitching as she nodded to the auctioneer. The diplomat from the balcony raised a paddle, his bids aggressive. But Poirot's attention was drawn elsewhere, to the chandelier above the podium, its pendants glittering like stars. One pendant, larger than the rest, caught his eye. Its shape was irregular, its glow deeper, almost obsidian. "Mon Dieu," he breathed, "the Black Queen hides in plain sight." He leaned toward Clara. "Stay here. Watch the bidders. Note who seems too eager." "Where are you going?" she hissed. But Poirot was already moving, his cane tapping lightly as he circled the room. He positioned himself near a spiral staircase that led to a catwalk above the chandelier. The auctioneer's voice droned on, the bids now a frenzy, but Poirot's focus was singular. He climbed the stairs, his movements swift yet silent, and reached the catwalk. Below, the crowd was oblivious, their eyes fixed on the false diamond. The chandelier was a masterpiece of crystal and gold, its pendants swaying gently. Poirot leaned forward, his gloved fingers brushing the largest pendant. It was heavier than the others, its surface cool and faintly flawed. He tilted it, catching the light, and there it was, the teardrop inclusion, a silent confession of authenticity. The Black Queen, embedded in plain sight, an audacious gambit by the conspirators. As he worked to free the pendant, a shadow moved behind him. He turned, cane raised, to find Madame Lisette, her silver mask now discarded, revealing a face both beautiful and cold. In her hand was a slender dagger, its blade catching the chandelier's light. "You're clever, Count," she said, her French accent gone, replaced by a clipped British tone, "but curiosity is a dangerous vice." Poirot's smile was serene. "And you, mademoiselle, are no Lisette. A pity, for I rather liked her charm." She lunged, but Poirot was ready. He parried with his cane, the silver tip striking her wrist. The dagger clattered to the catwalk, and Poirot kicked it away. Below, the crowd gasped as the auctioneer paused, sensing the disturbance. "You cannot stop this," she hissed, backing away. "The diamond is only the beginning." "Then let us see what follows," Poirot said, his voice calm but unyielding. He twisted the pendant free, slipping it into his pocket, just as an alarm shrieked through the manor. The lights flickered, and the crowd erupted into chaos, guests scattering like startled birds. Madame Lisette vanished into the shadows, her footsteps fading as Poirot descended the catwalk. He found Clara amidst the pandemonium, her mask askew, but her eyes alight with adrenaline. "Did you get it?" she whispered. Poirot patted his pocket. "The Black Queen is ours, but we are not yet safe." The manor's doors were flung open, and masked figures, guards perhaps, began herding guests toward the exits. Poirot and Clara slipped through a side door, emerging into the gardens. The night was alive with shouts and the crunch of gravel underfoot. A black car idled at the edge of the drive, its engine growling like a beast. Poirot pulled Clara behind a hedge as two men in dark coats emerged, their faces obscured by fedoras. "They have it," one said, his voice, "Lo, find them before they leave the grounds." Poirot's mind raced. The diamond was no mere gem. It was a key, a symbol, perhaps even a map to the conspiracy's heart. He gripped Clara's hand. "We must move, vite. The car is our only chance." They crept toward the drive, staying low. The car's driver was distracted, lighting a cigarette, his match flaring in the darkness. Poirot opened the passenger door, ushering Clara inside before sliding into the driver's seat. The keys were in the ignition, a stroke of luck. He turned the engine, and the car roared to life just as the driver spun, shouting. The chase was on. Poirot floored the accelerator, the car lurching down the gravel drive as headlights flared behind them. Clara clung to the door, her face pale but resolute. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. "To London," Poirot said, his eyes fixed on the road. "To the heart of this game. The Black Queen will lead us there." The manor's lights faded in the rearview mirror, but the pursuing cars were relentless, their engines a menacing chorus in the night. Poirot's hands were steady on the wheel, his mind already plotting the next move. The diamond, warm in his pocket, was more than a prize. It was a challenge, a dare to unravel the truth. And Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells, was never one to back down from a challenge. The car sped through the Kentish countryside, its tyres humming against the damp asphalt. Fog curled around the hedgerows, lending an ethereal quality to the chase. Poirot's thoughts were a whirlwind, piecing together the night's revelations. The fake diamond at the auction was a distraction, meant to draw attention while the real Black Queen hung in plain sight. Lady Evelyn's involvement was deeper than he'd suspected. She was not merely a player, but an orchestrator. Her nervous tick a mask for her cunning. And Madame Lisette, or whatever her true name was a hired blade sent to ensure the diamond remained in the conspirators' hands. Clara broke the silence. "That woman on the catwalk! She knew you weren't a count." "How?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "The little grey cells, they betray me not. She watched me too closely, noted my habits. A true count does not study chandeliers with such intensity." Clara laughed a nervous sound. "You're impossible, but what now? We have the diamond, but we're being chased by who knows who, and the manor's crawling with people who want us dead." "The diamond is a map," Poirot said, his voice thoughtful, "or a key. Its setting, I suspect, holds a secret, an engraving perhaps, or a code. We must examine it, but not here. We need a safe place, and allies." "Allies?" Clara's brow furrowed. "You don't trust me." "I trust your courage, mon ami. But your heart, it is still a mystery. You have secrets yet to share." She looked away, her fingers tightening on her purse. "I'm here, aren't I? Risking my neck with you." "And for that, I am grateful," Poirot said, his tone softening. "But trust, it is earned in layers, like the petals of a rose. We will peel them back together." The headlights behind them grew closer, their beams cutting through the fog. Poirot swerved onto a narrow lane, the car rattling over uneven ground. The pursuers followed, their engines roaring. "Hold fast," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "This game, it is not yet over." The lane twisted through a copse of trees, their branches scraping the car's roof. Poirot's mind was a chessboard, calculating moves. The diamond was the queen, powerful but vulnerable. The conspirators were knights and bishops, striking from angles he could not yet see. But Poirot was the king, slow, deliberate, and always one step ahead. A sudden jolt shook the car as a pursuing vehicle rammed their bumper. Clara gasped, bracing herself against the dashboard. "They're trying to run us off the road!" "Then we must be cleverer," Poirot said. He spotted a fork in the lane, one path leading to a village, the other into deeper woods. He chose the village, hoping for cover among its cottages. The car skidded around the turn, gravel spraying, and the pursuing lights faltered, momentarily confused. The village was a cluster of thatched roofs and dimly lit windows, its streets quiet save for the barking of a distant dog. Poirot slowed, pulling into an alley beside a shuttered bakery. "We abandon the car," he said, cutting the engine. "On foot, we're less predictable." They slipped out, the diamond heavy in Poirot's pocket. The fog was their ally now, cloaking their movements as they darted between buildings. The pursuing cars roared past, their headlights sweeping the main road. Poirot led Clara to a small inn, its sign creaking in the wind. "Here, we rest, but only for a moment." Inside, the inn was warm, its hearth crackling with a low fire. The innkeeper, a stout woman with flour-dusted hands, eyed them warily, but offered a room for the night. Poirot paid in cash, his Russian accent impeccable as he spun a tale of a delayed train and a missed connection. Clara, playing along, added a touch of weary charm, her sapphire gown now slightly rumpled. In their room, a small attic with slanted ceilings, Poirot examined the diamond under a borrowed magnifying glass. The setting was gold, intricately carved with what appeared to be a map, a series of lines and dots that suggested a location in London's East End. A warehouse, perhaps, he mused, or a dock. The conspirators, they hide their secrets in plain sight, just as they did with the diamond. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, her mask discarded, her face pale but determined. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice low. "The cigarette case you found, it wasn't mine, but I know who planted it. It was Evelyn. She's been watching me, trying to frame me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And why would she do this, mon ami?" Clara hesitated, then met his gaze. "Because I was getting too close. I've been investigating the ring for months, not just for a story, but because they ruined someone I loved. My brother, he was a gambler caught in their web. He's gone now, because of them." The confession hung in the air, raw and unguarded. Poirot studied her, his expression unreadable. "Then we are allies in truth," he said at last. "Your brother's memory, it will be honoured. But you must tell me everything, no more secrets." She nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "I will, but what now?" "Now," Poirot said, slipping the diamond back into his pocket. "We go to London. The map will lead us to the heart of this conspiracy. And there, mon ami, we will play our final hand." The night stretched on, the fog outside thickening, but Poirot's resolve was unshakable. The Black Queen was in his possession, but the game was far from won. The conspirators were closing in, their moves unpredictable, their stakes deadly. Yet Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells and his unyielding pursuit of truth, was ready to face them all. Chapter 7. The Midnight Chase. The fog draped the English countryside like a conspirator's cloak, thick and unyielding, swallowing the narrow lanes that twisted away from the manor. Hercule Poirot gripped the wheel of the borrowed Bentley, its engine purring with restrained urgency as he navigated the murky darkness. Beside him, Clara Henshaw clutched the stolen diamond, its faint glow refracting through the mist that clung to the windscreen. The weight of their escape pressed against them, not just from the masked pursuers on their tail, but from the secrets each carried, secrets that had just begun to unravel. Only minutes ago, Poirot had plucked the diamond from the chandelier's pendant at the Manor's masquerade, a moment of triumph now soured by the screech of tires behind them. The alarm's wail still echoed in his ears, a shrill reminder that their enemies were not mere gamblers, but players in a far deadlier game. Clara's confession, blurted amidst the chaos of their flight, hung heavier than the fog. She had been blackmailed into spying on him, feeding information to an unseen hand. Yet Poirot, ever the master of human nature, saw the flicker of remorse in her eyes, and chose to trust her, for now. "Faster, Monsieur Poirot!" Clara's voice cracked, her gaze darting to the side mirror, where twin beams pierced the haze closing in. "They're gaining?" "Patience, Mademoiselle Henshaw," Poirot replied, his tone calm despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. "The mind must remain as steady as the hand on the wheel. Panic is the ally of our pursuers." He eased the Bentley around a sharp bend, the tires skidding briefly on the damp cobblestones. The road was a ribbon of uncertainty, flanked by hedgerows that loomed like silent sentinels. Poirot's moustache twitched as he calculated their options. The pursuer's car, a sleek black Daimler, roared closer, its headlights slicing through the fog like knives. Whoever they were relentless, and Poirot suspected they were not after the diamond alone, but the knowledge it represented. Clara's fingers tightened around the gem, its cold facets biting into her palm. "What if they catch us? What if—" "Non, non," Poirot interrupted, his eyes fixed on the road. "The what if is a trap, mademoiselle. We focus on what is, and what is that we have the diamond, and they do not. This gives us the advantage, for the moment." The Bentley surged forward as Poirot pressed the accelerator. The engine's growl, a defiant counterpoint to the Daimler's pursuit. Clara glanced at him, marveling at his composure. His small, precise hands moved with the grace of a conductor, guiding the car through the labyrinthine lanes as if orchestrating a symphony. Yet beneath his calm exterior, she sensed a mind racing, piecing together the puzzle of their predicament. The chase had begun the moment they fled the manor, the diamond secured in Clara's coat pocket. Poirot had anticipated pursuit, but not its ferocity. The Daimler's driver was skilled, matching their every maneuver, and the occasional glimpse of a masked figure in the passenger seat sent a chill through Clara. These were not amateurs. The gambling ring, it seemed, extended far beyond the poker tables of Claridge's, its tendrils reaching into shadows Poirot had yet to illuminate. A sudden jolt shook the Bentley as the Daimler nudged their rear bumper, a calculated prod to unsettle them. Clara gasped, but Poirot's expression remained unchanged, his grey eyes narrowing with focus. "They wish to intimidate," he murmured, "but Hercule Poirot is not so easily swayed." He swerved left, taking a narrow fork that led toward a cluster of lights in the distance, a village perhaps, where they might find refuge. The Daimler followed, its engine snarling like a predator denied its prey. Poirot's mind churned through possibilities. The diamond, he suspected, was more than a jewel. It was a key, a cipher to something greater. The engraved map he had glimpsed inside its setting, a delicate etching visible only under the manor's chandelier light, hinted at a destination in London's East End. But to reach it, they needed to survive the night. "Monsieur Poirot," Clara said, her voice steadier now, "I owe you the truth. The blackmailer. They threatened to expose my brother. He's in debt, bad debt to men like these. I had no choice but to—" "Enough, mademoiselle," Poirot cut in, not unkindly. "The heart confesses when it is ready, and yours has spoken. We are allies now. We? Trust is a fragile thing, but it can be rebuilt. For now, we focus on survival." Clara nodded, her guilt, tempered by his forgiveness. She glanced at the diamond, its surface catching the faint glow of the dashboard. "What is this thing? Why is it worth all of this?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "That, mademoiselle, is the question that drives us. The diamond is a map, a key, perhaps even a confession. But to whom and for what? That is what we must discover." The village loomed closer, its lights a beacon in the fog. Poirot spotted a signpost. "Wickham's End, 1 mile." A plan began to form. "We need a place to hide, to think," he said. "A village inn, perhaps. Somewhere we can examine the diamond and plan our next move." The Daimler's headlights flared again, closer now, and a sharp crack split the air. A gunshot. The bullet grazed the Bentley's rear fender, sparking against the metal. Clara stifled a scream, but Poirot's hands remained steady. "They grow desperate," he observed. "A sign we are closer to the truth than they wish." He accelerated toward the village, the Bentley's tires humming as the road widened slightly. Wickham's End was a quaint cluster of stone cottages, their windows dark, save for a single glow from what appeared to be an inn. The Rusty Anchor. Poirot veered toward it, the Daimler hot on their heels. The inn's gravel lot offered a chance to maneuver, and Poirot seized it, spinning the wheel to execute a sharp turn that sent the Bentley skidding behind the building. "Out quickly!" he urged, cutting the engine. Clara scrambled from the car, clutching the diamond as they darted toward the inn's back entrance. The Daimler screeched into the lot, its occupants leaping out. 2 figures, masked and armed, their silhouettes menacing in the fog. Poirot pushed open the door, ushering Clara inside. The inn's kitchen was dimly lit, its air thick with the scent of stale ale and roasted mutton. A startled cook, a burly man with flour-dusted hands, gaped at them. "Oi, what's this?" he demanded. "Pardon, monsieur," Poirot said, his voice smooth despite the urgency. "We seek refuge. Men pursue us. Dangerous men. May we rely on your discretion?" The cook hesitated, then nodded, pointing to a narrow staircase. "Upstairs, 2nd door. Lock it and stay quiet. I'll handle anyone who comes sniffing." "Merci," Poirot said, pressing a pound note into the man's hand. He and Clara hurried up the creaking stairs, finding a small room, with a single bed, a rickety chair, and a window overlooking the lot. Poirot locked the door and drew the curtains, his movements precise, despite the pounding of his heart. Clara sank onto the bed, her breath ragged. "What now? They'll find us." "Not if we are clever," Poirot replied, retrieving the diamond from her trembling hands. He held it to the room's weak lamplight, turning it slowly. The engraved map glimmered, its lines forming a crude outline of London's East End, with a single point marked near the docks. J.A.I. derelict warehouse, perhaps. "This is our destination," he said, "but first we must ensure our safety." Below, voices echoed in the kitchen, the pursuers, questioning the cook. Poirot listened, his ear pressed to the floor. The cook's gruff tone deflected their inquiries, claiming no one had entered. The men lingered, their footsteps heavy, before retreating to the lot. Poirot exhaled softly. "We have a moment, mademoiselle. Let us use it wisely." He examined the diamond closely, his magnifying glass revealing intricacies in the engraving. A series of numbers alongside the map, perhaps coordinates or a code. "This is no ordinary gem," he murmured. "It is a message, a guide to something hidden. A warehouse, yes, but what lies within?" Clara leaned closer, her fear giving way to curiosity. Could it be money? Documents? Something the gambling ring wants to keep secret? "Perhaps all three," Poirot said. "The bets we uncovered in the ledgers were not merely for wealth, but for power. This diamond may unlock the heart of their scheme." A sudden thud at the door made them freeze. Poirot motioned for silence, his hand on the chair, ready to use it as a weapon. The handle rattled, then stopped. A low voice muttered outside, too muffled to discern, before footsteps retreated down the stairs. Clara's eyes were wide, but Poirot's calm steadied her. "They test us," he whispered, "but they will not find us unprepared." He turned back to the diamond, his mind racing. The map's destination was clear, but the journey there would be perilous. The pursuers knew they had the diamond, and their desperation suggested time was short. Poirot considered their next move. The Bentley was compromised, likely watched. They needed a new plan to reach London undetected. "Mademoiselle," he said, "you mentioned your brother's debts. Do you know his creditors? Their names, their connections?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. "One of them, a man called Victor Grigorov. Russian, I think. He's tied to the docks, runs a shipping business. Rough sort, but clever." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Grigorov, a name to remember. If he is part of this ring, he may be our link to the warehouse. We must proceed with caution, but also with boldness." A plan took shape. The village was small, but it had a train station, a fact Poirot recalled from a signpost on the road. A late-night freight train might pass through, offering a discreet way to London. They could slip out the inn's back window, cross the fields, and board the train before their pursuers realized they were gone. "We leave at midnight," Poirot declared. "The fog will aid us, and the train will carry us to the East End. But we must be vigilant. Our enemies are close, and they will not rest." Clara nodded, her resolve hardening. "I'm with you, Monsieur Poirot. I've made mistakes, but I want to make this right." "Bon," Poirot said, a rare warmth in his voice. "Then let us prepare." The next hour passed in tense silence as they gathered their meagre resources. A pocket-knife from Clara's bag, a map of the region torn from a book in the room, and the diamond now wrapped in a handkerchief. Poirot sketched a rough plan on the map, marking the train station a mile away. The fog, their ally, would conceal their movements, but it also hid their enemies. At 11:30, Poirot cracked open the window, peering into the night. The Daimler was gone, but he trusted his instincts. It was a ruse. The pursuers were likely watching from a distance, waiting for them to emerge. He tied the room's bedsheet to the radiator, creating a makeshift rope, and helped Clara climb down to the alley below. She landed softly, her journalist's agility serving her well. Poirot followed, his descent less graceful but determined. The fog enveloped them as they crept through the village, avoiding the main road. The train station was a squat building on the outskirts, its platform deserted, save for a lone porter dozing in a shed. Poirot checked his watch. 10 minutes until the freight train. They crouched behind a stack of crates, the diamond a heavy weight in Poirot's pocket. A low whistle signaled the train's approach, its headlamp cutting through the fog like a lighthouse beam. Poirot and Clara darted toward a flatbed car, its open side offering a chance to hide among sacks of grain. They climbed aboard just as the train lurched forward, its wheels groaning against the tracks. Inside the car, they huddled among the sacks, the rhythmic clatter of the train masking their whispers. Clara's face was pale but determined. "What if they're waiting for us in London?" she asked. "Then we shall be ready," Poirot replied, his voice steady. "The warehouse holds the answers we seek. The diamond has led us this far, and it will lead us further." As the train sped toward the city, Poirot's mind turned to the map's coordinates. The warehouse, he suspected, was a hub for the smuggling ring, a place where bets were settled not in coin, but in secrets. The dealer, the colonel, Lady Evelyn, each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. Clara's confession had added a new layer. Her brother's debts tied her to this web, and Poirot wondered how many others were ensnared. The train's whistle sounded again, signalling their approach to London. Poirot peered out, the fog thinning to reveal the city's sprawling silhouette. The East End awaited, a maze of alleys and shadows where the truth lay hidden. He glanced at Clara, her eyes fixed on the horizon, and felt a surge of resolve. They were fugitives, yes, but also hunters, and the game was far from over. The chapter closed with the train slowing, its brakes screeching as it neared the docks. Poirot tucked the diamond deeper into his pocket, his mind already plotting their next move. The warehouse loomed in his thoughts, a fortress of secrets waiting to be breached. Whatever lay within, Hercule Poirot would find it, and the truth would not escape him. Chapter 8. The Warehouse Trap. The fog clung to the East End like a conspirator, shrouding the derelict warehouse in a veil of damp grey. Hercule Poirot adjusted his overcoat, the chill seeping through despite the fine wool. Beside him, Clara Henshaw's breath puffed in nervous clouds, her eyes darting to every shadow that flickered in the gaslight's feeble glow. The warehouse loomed ahead, its broken windows like the hollow eyes of a forgotten giant, and the faint creak of rusted iron echoed in the stillness. They had come too far to turn back now. "Stay close, Mademoiselle Henshaw," Poirot murmured, his voice low but steady. "The mind of the criminal is like a chessboard. One must anticipate the moves before they are played." Clara nodded, clutching her satchel, where she tucked a notebook and a small flashlight. Her earlier confession of blackmail had shaken her, but Poirot's unexpected forgiveness had kindled a spark of resolve. She was no longer a pawn in this deadly game, and she intended to prove it. The warehouse door, warped and splintered, groaned as Poirot pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of mould, oil, and something metallic. Blood, perhaps, or merely rust. Crates towered in uneven stacks, creating a labyrinth that seemed to shift in the dim light filtering through the cracked roof. Somewhere in this maze lay the heart of the gambling ring, the evidence Poirot needed to unmask the dealer and his network. They moved cautiously, Poirot's polished shoes silent on the grimy floor, his eyes scanning for the smallest detail. Clara's flashlight beam danced across the crates, revealing faded shipping labels. Lisbon, Marseille, Istanbul. The scope of the operation was staggering, a web of illicit bets stretching across continents. "These crates," Poirot whispered, pausing to examine a splintered lid, "they are not merely for storage. They are a facade, n'est-ce pas? A cover for something far more valuable than smuggled wine or tobacco." Clara frowned, her journalist's instincts flaring. "You think the diamond's here?" "No, not the diamond itself," Poirot said, tapping his temple. "The Black Queen is but a symbol. What we seek is the truth it guards, records, names, the arteries of this conspiracy." A faint scrape echoed from deeper within the warehouse, and Clara froze. Poirot raised a hand, his head tilted, listening. The sound came again, deliberate, like boots on concrete. Someone was here, and they were not alone. "Stay behind me," Poirot instructed, his tone calm but unyielding. He slipped a small silver penknife from his pocket, not a weapon, but a tool for a man who trusted his wits over brute force. Clara extinguished her flashlight, plunging them into near darkness. They crept forward, navigating the narrow paths between crates. The air grew colder, the shadows denser. Poirot's moustache twitched as he caught a whiff of something new. Cigar smoke, rich and acrid, a scent too refined for this decrepit place. He gestured for Clara to crouch behind a crate as he peered around a corner. In a small clearing, illuminated by a single hanging bulb, stood a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, his face obscured by a fedora's brim, he puffed on a cigar, its ember glowing like a malevolent eye. The dealer. Beside him, a table held a ledger, a pistol, and a crate marked with a Black Queen symbol, a crude chess piece etched in paint. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The dealer was not alone. Two figures, their faces hidden by scarves, moved in the shadows, unloading another crate. The faint clink of metal suggested weapons or contraband. This was no mere meeting. It was a transaction, the kind that fueled the gambling ring's empire. Clara's hand brushed Poirot's arm, her voice a whisper. "What now?" "We can't just walk in." "Patience, mademoiselle," Poirot replied, his gaze fixed on the dealer. "The criminal reveals himself most when he believes he is unseen. We observe, we learn, and then we act." They waited, the seconds stretching into minutes. The dealer barked orders, his voice low but commanding. "Hurry it up! The shipment's due at the docks by dawn. No mistakes this time." One of the scarved men grumbled, his accent thick, Eastern European perhaps. "You said the diamond would be here. Where is it?" The dealer laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "The diamond's a distraction, you fool. The real prize is in the ledgers. Names, dates, debts. Control over men who think they control the world." Poirot's lips curled slightly. The dealer's arrogance was his weakness, a crack in the armor of his carefully laid plans. But before Poirot could signal Clara to move, a new sound cut through the silence. A soft click, like a latch being undone. It came from behind them. Clara spun, her eyes wide. Poirot's hand shot out, pulling her down as a figure emerged from the shadows. A man, wiry and silent, wielded a crowbar. His eyes gleamed with intent, and he lunged. Poirot reacted with surprising agility for a man of his fastidious demeanor. He sidestepped, using the penknife to deflect the crowbar with a metallic clang. Clara scrambled back, knocking over a crate that crashed with a deafening thud. The noise reverberated, drawing shouts from the dealer's men. "Run!" Poirot hissed, shoving Clara toward a gap in the crates. She hesitated, then bolted, her footsteps echoing. Poirot followed, but not before snatching a loose paper from the fallen crate, a page torn from a ledger, its edges singed. The warehouse erupted into chaos. The dealer's men gave chase, their boots pounding as they shouted in a mix of English and foreign tongues. Poirot and Clara darted through the maze, ducking under beams and weaving between stacks. The air grew heavy with dust, the crates trembling as if the warehouse itself were alive and angry. They reached a dead end, a wall of crates too high to climb. Clara's breath hitched. "We're trapped!" "No, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice calm despite the approaching footsteps. He scanned the crates, his fingers tracing a seam. There is always a way for those who see. With a swift motion, he pressed a loose board, and a hidden panel swung open, revealing a narrow passage. "Quickly," he urged, pushing Clara through. They squeezed into the dark tunnel, the panel snapping shut behind them. The passage was cramped, smelling of damp wood and earth. Clara's flashlight flickered back on, illuminating cobwebs and rusted pipes. "How did you know?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "The mind of the smuggler is predictable," Poirot replied, his tone almost cheerful. "They build their lairs with escapes, for they know the hunter will come." The passage led to a small room, barely larger than a closet, filled with more crates and a single table. On it lay a stack of documents, a typewriter, and a half-burnt cigar, evidence of the dealer's operation. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he scanned the papers. "Magnifique," he murmured, "the heart of the beast." Clara rifled through the documents, her journalist's instincts taking over. "These are contracts, shipping manifests, bribes to port officials. It's all here, Poirot." The whole network before Poirot could respond. The panel behind them burst open. The dealer stood there, his cigar gone, his face a mask of fury. In his hand, the pistol gleamed. "You're a clever little man, Poirot," he said, his voice dripping with menace, "but clever men die just as easily." Clara gasped, but Poirot remained unruffled. "Monsieur, you mistake me for one who fears the gun. It is not the weapon that wins, but the mind that wields it." The dealer sneered, stepping closer. "You've been a thorn in my side too long. The diamond, the ledgers, it's all mine. And you're just a nuisance." Poirot's eyes flicked to the table, where a heavy brass paperweight sat beside the typewriter. "A nuisance, perhaps," he said, his tone light, "but one with a certain resourcefulness." In a flash, he seized the paperweight and hurled it at a crate behind the dealer. The stack collapsed with a thunderous crash, blocking the passage and sending a cloud of dust into the air. The dealer stumbled, coughing, his pistol wavering. "Clara, now!" Poirot shouted. She grabbed a crate, shoving it toward the dealer, who dodged but tripped over another. Poirot darted forward, snatching the pistol and tossing it into a corner. With a swift motion, he yanked a rope from a nearby crate, looping it around the dealer's wrists and securing him to a rusted pipe. You can't stop this," the dealer snarled, struggling. "The ring is bigger than you know." Poirot smiled, faintly. "Perhaps, monsieur. But today, it is you who are caught." Clara gathered the documents, stuffing them into her satchel. "We need to get out of here," she said, her voice urgent. "His men will be back." Poirot nodded, but his gaze fell on a small, locked box on the table. He pried it open with his penknife, revealing a single sheet. A list of names, some crossed out, others circled. Among them, one stood out, Colonel Reginald Hawthorne. "The Colonel," Poirot murmured, his mind racing. "He is not merely a player in this game. He is a piece on the board." They fled the room, retracing their steps through the passage. The warehouse was quieter now, the shouts of the dealer's men fading. Perhaps they'd scattered, fearing police. Outside the fog had thickened, but the first light of dawn tinged the sky. Clara clutched the satchel, her face pale, but determined. "What now?" she asked. "The Colonel, do we confront him?" Poirot adjusted his hat, his expression resolute. "Oui, mademoiselle. The game is not yet over. The colonel holds a key and we shall turn it." As they vanished into the fog, the warehouse stood silent, its secrets exposed, but its dangers far from ended. The list in Poirot's pocket burned with promise, a map to the next move in this deadly gamble. Chapter 9. The Colonel's Confession. The fog clung to London streets like a conspirator, muffling the clatter of hooves and the hum of early-morning motor cars. Hercule Poirot adjusted his overcoat, the damp chill seeping through even the finest wool, as he stepped out of a hansom cab onto the polished cobbles of Mayfair. His polished shoes clicked with purpose, each step a metronome to the rhythm of his thoughts. The trail of the gambling ring had led him here, to the imposing facade of Colonel Reginald Ashby's flat, a Georgian relic of faded grandeur nestled among the city's elite. Poirot's grey cells churned, piecing together the mosaic of clues. The poisoned industrialist, the coded ledgers, the Black Queen diamond, and now the Colonel's name on a list of clients tied to the smuggling ring. The warehouse ambush had been a revelation, but it raised more questions than answers. Why was Ashby, a man of military precision and tarnished honour, entangled in this web? And who was listening, always listening to their moves? He paused at the doorstep, his gloved hand hovering over the brass knocker. The Colonel was a man of contradictions, proud yet broken, disciplined yet ensnared by debt. Poirot's moustache twitched as he considered the man's nervous demeanour at the poker table, the way his fingers had drummed a staccato beat when the dealer spoke. There was guilt there, but of what kind? Murder? Betrayal? Or merely weakness? The knocker fell with a dull thud, and moments later, a butler with a face like weathered oak opened the door. "Monsieur Poirot?" he inquired, his tone betraying neither surprise nor warmth. "Oui, c'est moi," Poirot replied, his voice smooth as velvet. "I am here to see Colonel Ashby. It is a matter most urgent." The butler led him through a dimly lit hall, its walls adorned with faded portraits of stern-faced ancestors. The air smelled of old leather and cigar smoke, a testament to a life clinging to past glories. They reached a study where the Colonel stood by a roaring fire, his back to the door, shoulders hunched as if bearing an invisible weight. He turned at the sound of Poirot's cane tapping the floor, his weathered face tightening. "Poirot," Ashby said, his voice gruff but unsteady. "I didn't expect you. Not here." "Yet here I am, Colonel," Poirot said, removing his hat with a flourish and placing it on a mahogany table. "The truth, it has a way of summoning me, no? And it seems you have much to share." Ashby's eyes darted to the window, where the fog pressed against the glass like a living thing. "I don't know what you mean," he said, but his hands betrayed him, clenching and unclenching at his sides. Poirot settled into a leather armchair, uninvited, and crossed his legs with deliberate ease. "Let us dispense with the games, Colonel. Your name, it appears, on a list, a most intriguing list, found in a warehouse where a certain dealer sought to trap me. This list, it speaks of debts, of bets, of secrets. Shall we discuss it, or do you prefer I take my findings to Scotland Yard?" The Colonel's face blanched, the firelight casting harsh shadows across his features. He sank into a chair opposite Poirot, his military posture crumbling. "You don't understand, Poirot. It's not what you think." "Then enlighten me," Poirot said, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. "For I think of murder, of smuggling, of a diamond called the Black Queen, and I think of you, entangled in it all, Ashby ran a hand through his thinning hair, his fingers trembling. "It started with the cards," he began, his voice low. "After the war, I lost my way. The debts piled up. Gambling, you see, it's a sickness. I thought I could outrun it, but the ring, they offered a way out." "The ring?" Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but insistent. "This gambling ring, who runs it? The dealer?" Ashby shook his head. "He's part of it, but not the head. There's someone else, someone I never met. They call the shots, and the dealer enforces them. I joined to clear my debts, Poirot. They promised to wipe the slate clean if I placed certain bets, passed certain messages." "And these messages," Poirot said, "they involved the Black Queen?" Ashby's eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing his face. "How did you— Poirot!" "He knows many things," the detective interrupted, waving a hand. "The diamond? It is more than a gem, oui? A key, perhaps, to something greater." The colonel hesitated, his gaze dropping to the fire. "I didn't know about the murders, he said at last. "I swear it. The bets were strange, coded, tied to shipments, artifacts. I thought it was just smuggling, not poison." Poirot's lips pursed, his mind racing. The colonel's confession was sincere, but incomplete. There was a piece missing, a shadow behind the shadow. He rose, pacing the room, his cane tapping a slow rhythm. His eyes scanned the study, the cluttered desk, the shelves of military tomes, the faint hum of something. A wire, perhaps? His gaze settled on a brass lamp, its base slightly askew. "Colonel," Poirot said, pausing mid-step, "you say you did not know of the murders. Yet someone knew enough to listen, to watch. Tell me, are we alone?" Ashby frowned, confused. "Of course we're—" Poirot raised a finger, silencing him. He approached the lamp, his movements deliberate. With a deft twist, he lifted the base, revealing a small microphone, its wires snaking into the wall. Ashby gasped, leaping to his feet. "Good God!" he whispered. "They've been listening." "Oui," Poirot said, his voice icy. "And now, Colonel, we shall turn their game against them." He motioned for Ashby to follow his lead, his mind already crafting a plan. "We must speak, you and I, as if we suspect nothing. But we shall plant a seed, a little drama to draw out our eavesdropper." Ashby nodded, his face pale but resolute. "What do you want me to say?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "You will confess, Colonel, but not to me. To the air, to the walls. You will say you know the true mastermind, that you have proof, a ledger, perhaps, hidden in your safe. And you will say you intend to take it to the police tomorrow." "But I don't have any ledger," Ashby protested. "Précisément," Poirot said, a smile curling his lips. "They do not know that. Now, let us begin." Ashby cleared his throat, his voice loud and unsteady at first. "Poirot, I've had enough of this. I know who's behind it all, the real leader of the ring. I've got proof, a ledger in my safe, and I'm taking it to Scotland Yard at dawn." Poirot played along, his tone indignant. "Colonel, you cannot act alone. This is madness. If they learn of this, your life is forfeit." "Let them come," Ashby roared, warming to the act. "I'm done hiding. The ledger names them all. Every player, every deal. I'll see them hang." The room fell silent, the crackle of the fire the only sound. Poirot held up a hand, listening. A faint creak came from the hall, followed by the soft thud of footsteps retreating. He moved swiftly to the door, peering out, but the corridor was empty. The butler nowhere in sight. "They have taken the bait," Poirot murmured. "Now, Colonel, we must prepare. Our listener will act quickly to silence you." Ashby's face hardened, What's the plan, Poirot? Poirot's mind raced, calculating. The eavesdropper would report to their master, and a trap would be set, likely at the Yeard, flat tonight. But Poirot had no intention of being the prey. He needed to control the board, to turn the hunter into the hunted. "We shall need a tracker," Poirot said, his voice low. "Something small, discreet. Do you have such a thing, Colonel? A military trinket, perhaps?" Ashby's eyes lit up. "My old regiment used signal pins, small, magnetic, used for covert ops. I've got one in storage." "Parfait," Poirot said. "Fetch it, and quickly. We shall place it on our uninvited guest when they come." As Ashby rummaged through a locked cabinet, Poirot examined the microphone, tracing its wires to a hidden panel in the wall. It was crude but effective, likely installed by someone with access to the flat. The butler, a servant, or someone closer to the ring? Ashby returned with a tiny pin, no larger than a cufflink, its surface etched with a faint grid. "It emits a low-frequency signal," he explained. "We used to track squads behind enemy lines. The receiver's in my desk." Poirot nodded, tucking the pin into his pocket. "Now, we wait, but not idly. Tell me, Colonel, of your debts. Who held them? The dealer?" "No," Ashby said, his voice bitter. "A man named Voss. Never met him, but he's the one who roped me in. The dealer just enforced the terms." "Voss?" Poirot repeated, filing the name away. "And where might we find this Monsieur Voss?" Ashby shook his head. "No one knows. He's a ghost. Messages came through dead drops, alleys, postboxes. The dealer handled the rest." Poirot's moustache twitched. A ghost indeed, but every ghost left traces, and Poirot was a master at finding them. He glanced at the clock, nearly 10 o'clock. The night was young, and their eavesdropper would not wait long. "Colonel," Poirot said, "you will remain here, visible but cautious. I shall conceal myself in the shadows of your garden. When our guest arrives, I will ensure the pin finds its mark." Ashby nodded, his jaw tight. "And if they come armed?" "Then Hercule Poirot shall be swifter," he replied, his tone leaving no room for doubt. The garden was a maze of fog and overgrown roses, their thorns snagging at Poirot's coat as he crouched behind a stone fountain. The cold bit at his fingers, but his mind was alight, every sense attuned to the night. The flat's rear door, a servant's entrance, was his target. If the eavesdropper was bold, they would enter there, seeking the fictitious ledger. Hours passed, the fog thickening until the street lamps were mere halos. Then a shadow moved, a figure in a dark coat, moving with the silence of a predator. Poirot's heart quickened, but he remained still, his breath shallow. The figure paused at the door, producing a lockpick with practiced ease. The door clicked open, and they slipped inside. Poirot moved like a wraith, his cane silent on the grass. He reached the door just as it swung shut, catching it with a gloved hand. Inside, the figure crept toward the study, unaware of Poirot's presence. The detective's fingers closed around the pin, his plan crystallizing. The figure reached the study, where Ashby sat at his desk, pretending to pore over papers. The intruder raised a silenced pistol, and Poirot acted. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed the pin, its magnetic tip catching on the hem of the intruder's coat. The figure froze, sensing something, but Poirot was already retreating, melting into the shadows. A tense moment passed. Then the intruder lowered the weapon, muttering into a hidden earpiece. "No ledger! He's bluffing." The voice was male, clipped and unfamiliar. Not the dealer, then. Someone new. The figure slipped out, leaving Ashby unharmed. Poirot emerged, his heart pounding but his mind clear. He returned to the study where Ashby sat, pale but composed. "They didn't take the bait," Ashby said, his voice hoarse. "Oh, but they did," Poirot replied, holding up the receiver, its faint beep indicating the pin's signal. "Our friend is on the move, and we shall follow." They hurried to Ashby's car, a sleek Bentley parked in a nearby mews. The receiver guided them through London's fog-choked streets, the signal leading towards the East End. The docks, Poirot realized, his mind flashing to the warehouse, the diamond, the conspiracy. The pieces were aligning, but the picture was still incomplete. The signal stopped at a derelict pier, where the Thames lapped against rotting wood. Poirot and Ashby approached on foot, the fog their ally now. A warehouse loomed ahead, its windows dark but for a faint glow. Voices carried through the mist, a heated exchange. Poirot crouched behind a stack of crates, motioning for Ashby to stay low. The voices grew clearer. The intruder, now unmasked, arguing with another figure. The second voice was cold, authoritative, and chillingly familiar. The corrupt police inspector Hargreaves, whom Poirot had suspected since the journalist's tip. "He knows too much," Hargreaves snapped. "The ledger, the diamond, it's all unravelling." "Then we end it," the intruder replied. "Ashby first, then Poirot." Poirot's lips curled. The trap had caught a bigger fish than he'd hoped. He whispered to Ashby, "Stay here. Alert the yard. Use the phone in the car. Tell them Inspector Hargreaves is at the docks and bring reinforcements." Ashby nodded, slipping away. Poirot crept closer, his cane a silent extension of his will. Hargreaves was the key, the link between the ring and the law. But who was above him? Voss? Or someone else? The conversation shifted, Hargreaves mentioning a rendezvous at dawn. Poirot's mind raced. Dawn, the docks, a final exchange. The diamond, the secrets, the mastermind. It would all converge there. He retreated, the receiver still beeping faintly in his pocket. The pin had done its job, but the night was far from over. As he rejoined Ashby, the Colonel's face was grim, yards on the way. "But Poirot, if Hargreaves is dirty, who can we trust?" "Trust Hercule Poirot," the detective said, his eyes gleaming in the fog. "For now, we follow the signal, and at dawn we shall see the truth laid bare." The chapter closed with the distant wail of a police siren, the fog swirling like a curtain falling on a stage. Poirot's heart beat steady, his mind a beacon in the dark. The Colonel's confession had opened a door, but the real battle lay ahead, at the docks, where the final cards would be played. Chapter 10. The Docks at Dawn. The air at London's East End docks hung thick with the scent of tar, salt, and coal dust, a gritty perfume that clung to Hercule Poirot's overcoat as he crouched behind a rusted shipping crate. Dawn was breaking, a thin streak of pale gold slicing through the heavy fog that swirled over the Thames. The river lapped lazily against the pilings, its rhythm broken only by the occasional creak of a moored barge or the distant clatter of dock workers beginning their day. Poirot's moustache twitched as he adjusted his grip on the small, polished cane he carried. Not for support, but as a discreet weapon, its hidden blade a precaution for moments like this. Beside him, Clara Henshaw shivered, her breath visible in the chilly air. Her journalist's instincts had sharpened over the past days, but her nerves were frayed, her eyes darting toward every shadow. She clutched a notebook, its pages filled with cryptic shorthand only she could decipher. "This is madness, Poirot," she whispered, her voice low but sharp. "If we're caught—" "Chut, Mademoiselle Clara," Poirot murmured, raising a gloved finger to his lips. His green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, scanned the docks. "To be caught is a possibility, yes, but to uncover the truth, that is a necessity. And Hercule Poirot does not shy away from necessity." Clara's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded, her trust in Poirot outweighing her fear. They had tracked the corrupt Inspector Reginald Vance here. Following the tiny transmitter, Poirot had slipped into the man's coat pocket during their confrontation at the Colonel's flat. The device, a marvel of modern engineering borrowed from a discreet contact at Scotland Yard, had led them to this desolate stretch of the docks, where Vance was meeting a foreign operative. A man Poirot suspected held the key to the mysterious diamond's true purpose. The events of the past hours replayed in Poirot's mind with the clarity of a silent film. The Colonel's confession had unravelled one thread of the conspiracy, but it had also exposed Vance, a man whose badge masked a heart blackened by greed. The transmitter's signal had pulsed steadily through the night, guiding Poirot and Clara from the elegant streets of Mayfair to this industrial wasteland. Now, as the fog thickened, Poirot's senses were on high alert. Every sound a potential clue, every shadow a possible threat. "There," Clara whispered, pointing toward a narrow alley between two towering stacks of crates. A faint glow flickered, the telltale sign of a cigarette being lit. Poirot's eyes narrowed. He gestured for Clara to stay low and crept forward, his polished shoes silent on the damp cobblestones. The cane rested lightly in his hand, its weight reassuring. As they neared the alley, voices emerged from the fog, low, urgent and laced with tension. Poirot recognized Vance's gruff tone immediately, its clipped cadence betraying his agitation. The other voice was unfamiliar, smooth and accented, with a cadence that suggested Eastern European origins, perhaps Polish or Hungarian. Poirot strained to catch the words. "The diamond is secure?" the foreign voice asked, its owner obscured by the crates. Vance snorted. "It's where no one will find it. But I want assurances, Kovac. The payment? Patience, Inspector." The man called Kovac interrupted, his tone smooth as oil. "The box is worth more than gold. You'll have your share once it's opened." Poirot's mind raced. The box, the diamond then, was not merely a gem but a key, likely to a safe deposit box, as he had begun to suspect. But what could it contain? Secrets valuable enough to kill for, to orchestrate an international smuggling ring, to draw players from London's elite to its criminal underbelly. He glanced at Clara, whose pencil was already scribbling notes, her face pale but resolute. A sudden clatter broke the silence, a crate shifting under someone's weight. Poirot froze, his heart steady but his senses razor-sharp. The voices stopped. A long pause followed, then Kovac spoke again, his tone now edged with suspicion. "You were followed, Vance." "Impossible," Vance snapped, but his voice wavered. "I checked." "Then explain the shadow by the crates," Kovac hissed. Poirot's breath caught. He pressed himself against the cold metal of the crate, signalling Clara to do the same. Her eyes widened, but she obeyed, flattening herself against the rough wood. Footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate. Poirot's fingers tightened on his cane, the hidden blade a mere twist away. He calculated the distance, 10 feet, perhaps less. If Vance or Kovac discovered them, escape would be difficult, and a fight in this fog-drenched maze would favour the enemy. But Poirot was not one to rely on chance. His mind, that meticulous machine, churned through possibilities, discarding the improbable, refining the plausible. The footsteps stopped. A beam of light, a flashlight, swept across the crates, its arc narrowly missing Poirot's polished shoe. Clara's hand gripped his arm, her nails digging into the wool of his coat. Poirot remained still, his breathing controlled, his eyes locked on the faint silhouette of a man just beyond the crate. It was Vance, his bulky frame unmistakable, the cigarette now dangling from his lips. "Nothing," Vance muttered, the light flicking off. "You're paranoid, Kovacs." "Paranoia keeps me alive," Kovacs replied coldly. "Show me the diamond." Poirot's pulse quickened. The diamond was here, within reach. He edged forward, peering through a gap between the crates. In the dim light, he saw Vance pull a small velvet pouch from his pocket and tip its contents into his palm. The gem caught the faint dawn light, refracting it into a prism of colours that danced across the fog. Kovacs leaned closer, his face still obscured, but Poirot noted the glint of a gold ring on his hand, engraved with a serpent motif. "It's real," Vance said, his voice low. "The key to the box. You have the location." "Zurich," Kovacs replied. "Bank of Schweiz. Vault 317, but we move tonight. The others are getting restless." Poirot's mind catalogued the details. Zurich, Bank of Schweiz, Vault 317. The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was far from complete. What lay in that vault? And who were the others? The dealer, perhaps, or Lady Evelyn, whose role in this affair remained maddeningly unclear. Poirot needed more evidence, more clarity, more time. Then, without warning, the world erupted. A deafening blast tore through the docks, a fireball blooming in the distance, its heat washing over Poirot and Clara, even from their hiding spot. Crates toppled, splinters flying as the shockwave rattled the ground. Screams echoed, followed by the wail of sirens. Poirot grabbed Clara, pulling her behind a larger crate as debris rained down. His hat, miraculously, remained in place. "Mon Dieu!" he exclaimed, his voice steady despite the chaos. "A diversion, Mademoiselle Clara! They mean to escape!" Clara coughed, waving away the acrid smoke that now mingled with the fog. "Vance! He's running!" Through the haze, Poirot saw Vance sprinting toward a waiting motorboat, the diamond pouch clutched in his hand. Kovacs was already aboard, shouting orders to a third man at the helm. The boat's engine roared to life, its propeller churning the murky water. Poirot's eyes darted to the injured figures staggering near the blast site, dock workers caught in the explosion. One man, bloodied but alive, was crawling towards the water's edge. Poirot recognized him instantly. Inspector Vance, who must have been thrown back by the blast. The boat was pulling away, Kovacs' figure receding into the fog. "Stay here," Poirot ordered Clara, his tone brooking no argument. He sprinted toward Vance, his cane tapping the ground with purpose. The inspector was groaning, his coat singed, his face smeared with soot. Poirot knelt beside him, his voice calm but commanding. "Inspector Vance, you are alive, but your freedom hangs by a thread. Tell me, what is in the vault?" Vance's eyes, wild with pain, focused on Poirot. You're mad," he rasped. "They'll kill me. And if you do not speak, I will ensure you face justice," Poirot said, his tone icy. "The diamond is a key, yes? To what?" Vance coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Documents," he whispered. "State secrets, plans to cripple governments. They've been betting on chaos, Poirot. Rigging elections, markets, everything." Poirot's mind whirred. State secrets. The gambling ring was no mere criminal enterprise. It was a weapon, a tool to destabilize nations. The diamond, the bets, the murders, all part of a larger game, one played on a global board. He pressed further. "Who is Kovacs? Who does he serve?" Vance's eyes fluttered, his strength fading. "He's a broker. Works for a syndicate. Berlin, maybe Moscow. I don't know more." The sirens grew louder, police and fire brigades converging on the docks. Poirot knew time was short. He searched Vance's pockets, retrieving the transmitter and a crumpled note with a single word. Zurich. He slipped both into his own pocket, then stood, his expression grim. Clara appeared at his side, her notebook clutched tightly. "He's telling the truth, isn't he?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Oui, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his gaze fixed on the river, where the motorboat had vanished into the fog. "But the truth is only the beginning. We must go to Zurich. The vault holds the answers." As police swarmed the docks, Poirot and Clara slipped away, blending into the chaos. The diamond was gone, but its destination was clear. The game was far from over. And Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells and unyielding resolve, was ready for the next move. The journey to Zurich began that same morning, aboard a sleek express train bound for the continent. Poirot sat in a private compartment, his hands folded neatly over his cane, his eyes half-closed in thought. Clara sat opposite, her fingers tapping nervously on her notebook. The clatter of the train's wheels on the tracks provided a steady rhythm, a counterpoint to the whirlwind of Poirot's thoughts. "Monsieur Poirot," Clara began, breaking the silence, "what if we're walking into a trap? Kovacs knew we were there, or suspected it. He's not careless." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Careless? No, mademoiselle, but arrogance, that is his weakness. He believes he has outrun us, that the explosion has erased his trail. But Hercule Poirot does not chase shadows. We follow facts, and the facts lead to Zurich." Clara leaned forward, her voice low. "And Vance? Will he talk to the police?" Poirot's smile faded. "Inspector Vance is a man of divided loyalties. He will speak, yes, but only what serves him. We cannot rely on him. Our task is to reach the vault before Kovacs, and to understand what he seeks." The train sped through the English countryside, fields giving way to the grey sprawl of Dover, where they would board a ferry to Calais. Poirot's mind returned to the diamond, its engraved map, a tantalizing clue. He had examined it briefly during the chase, its intricate lines suggesting a code beyond mere geography. A safe deposit box, yes, but what else? A cipher, perhaps, or a list of names. Those who stood to gain from the chaos Vance described. As the ferry crossed the channel, Poirot stood at the rail, the wind tugging at his coat. Clara joined him, her scarf fluttering. "You're not like other detectives," she said, her tone curious. "You don't carry a gun. You don't chase men down alleys. Yet you're always one step ahead. How?" Poirot chuckled softly. "The little grey cells, mademoiselle. They are my weapon, my map, my compass. A gun may stop a man, but only understanding can stop a conspiracy. And this conspiracy," he paused, his eyes distant, "it is a hydra with many heads. We have cut off one, perhaps, but others remain." By evening they were on another train, this one winding through the French countryside toward Switzerland. Poirot's compartment was a haven of order, his suitcase neatly packed, his thermos of tisane at hand. Clara, however, was restless, pacing the narrow space. "Sit, mademoiselle," Poirot said gently. "You will wear a hole in the carpet, and the Swiss are most particular about their trains." Clara managed a weak smile and sat. "I can't stop thinking about the explosion. Who set it? Kovacs? Someone else?" Poirot tilted his head. "A question of timing. The blast occurred precisely when Vance showed the diamond. A coincidence? No. It was meant to scatter us, to give Kovacs time to escape. But who triggered it? That is a thread we must pull." He opened his suitcase, retrieving a small leather-bound notebook. With a pencil, he sketched a diagram. A circle labelled "The Dealer," connected to lines labelled Vance, Kovacs, Lady Evelyn, and the Colonel. Smaller lines branched off, marked with question marks. "The ring is vast," he said, tapping the page. "But its centre is the vault. We must be there first." Clara studied the diagram, her journalist's mind cataloguing the connections. "And the Black Queen, the diamond, a symbol," Poirot said. "A key, yes, but also a lure. It draws the players together, exposes their greed, their secrets. Whoever holds the diamond holds power, but also danger." The train slowed as it approached the Swiss border. Poirot closed his notebook, his expression resolute. "Tomorrow, Mademoiselle Clara, we become art dealers. We will need charm, cunning, and a touch of audacity. Are you prepared?" Clara met his gaze, her fear giving way to determination. "I've come this far, haven't I?" "Indeed," Poirot said, his eyes twinkling, "and together we shall go further." Zurich greeted them with crisp alpine air and the orderly hum of a city that prided itself on precision. The Bank of Schweiz loomed at the end of Bahnhofstrasse, its marble facade as imposing as a fortress. Poirot, dressed in a tailored suit with a forged letter of introduction, presented himself as Monsieur Henri Dubois, an art dealer seeking to deposit a rare painting. Clara, posing as his assistant, carried a leather portfolio stuffed with fabricated documents. The bank's interior was a cathedral of wealth, its polished floors reflecting chandeliers that gleamed like stars. A stern-faced manager, Herr Schmidt, greeted them with polite skepticism. "Your credentials are unconventional, Monsieur Dubois," he said, adjusting his spectacles. Poirot's smile was disarming. "Art, Herr Schmidt, is often unconventional, but its value is undeniable. May we discuss access to Vault 317? A client of mine has expressed interest in its contents." Schmidt's eyes narrowed. "Vault 317 is not available for casual inspection. You understand, we prioritize discretion." "Of course," Poirot said smoothly, "but my client is most insistent. Perhaps a brief verification of the vault's security." Schmidt hesitated, then nodded. "Very well, follow me." As they descended to the vault level, Poirot's mind catalogued every detail. The number of guards, 3. The type of locks, dual key, mechanical. The cameras, none. A curious oversight. Clara's hand trembled slightly, but she kept her composure, her portfolio a shield against suspicion. The vault room was a still-walled chamber, its walls lined with numbered boxes. Vault 317 was unremarkable. A small brass door among hundreds. Schmidt produced a key, but before he could insert it, a commotion erupted upstairs, a shout, followed by the crash of glass. Poirot's instincts flared. "A diversion," he whispered to Clara. To Schmidt he said, "Herr Schmidt, it seems there is trouble." "We will wait." Schmidt hurried upstairs, leaving them alone. Poirot moved swiftly, producing a small lock-picking kit from his pocket. "Mademoiselle Clara, Keep watch." Clara's eyes widened. "You know how to pick locks?" Poirot's moustache twitched. A gentleman must have many skills. The lock clicked open in under a minute, a testament to Poirot's dexterity. Inside the vault was a single metal case, its lid engraved with the same serpent motif Poirot had seen on Kovac's ring. He opened it, revealing a stack of documents bound in leather. Before he could read them, footsteps echoed in the corridor. "Poirot!" Clara hissed. "Someone's coming!" He snapped the case shut and relocked the vault, pocketing a single folded sheet he'd managed to slip out. They retreated to the shadows as Kovac himself entered, flanked by 2 armed men. His face was sharp and hawk-like, his eyes scanning the room. "They've been here," Kovac said, his voice low. "The lock's been touched." Poirot's heart raced, but he remained still, his cane ready. Clara's hand found his, her grip steadying them both. Kovac's men searched the room, their boots echoing on the steel floor. One paused mere feet from their hiding spot, his flashlight sweeping past. Then, a miracle. Schmidt returned, his voice sharp. "Herr Kovac, this is highly irregular. You cannot enter without—" Kovac silenced him with a gesture. "Open the vault, Schmidt, now." As Schmidt complied, Poirot and Clara slipped out, using the distraction to escape upstairs. The bank was in chaos, guards rushing to contain a staged robbery at the entrance, another of Kovac's diversions. Poirot and Clara blended into the crowd, emerging onto Bahnhofstrasse as alarms wailed behind them. In a quiet cafe, Poirot unfolded the stolen document. It was a list of names, politicians, bankers, generals, each tied to a sum of money and a coded instruction. At the top, in bold, was a single phrase, "Operation Black Queen." Clara's breath caught. "This is bigger than we thought." "Oui," Poirot said, his voice grave, "and more dangerous. We must move quickly, mademoiselle. The game is not yet won." As they planned their next move, Poirot's mind burned with purpose. The docks at dawn had revealed the stakes. Zurich had revealed the players. But the final hand was yet to be played, and Hercule Poirot would not fold.